Violet flips over the missive to see a note from Xaden that says, "Don't look for me. It's yours now." He's gone. The Duke of Angst is now the Duke of Ain't. He's gone.
I somehow missed that in your notes the first time I was reading through them.
Welcome back to the Books and Fantasy Podcast. I'm Addison. I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book shows and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Guys, we are finally done after almost 3 months of covering this book. And low-key driving myself into the loony bin. I feel like I can kind of relax now.
Right? Like I can take a breath of fresh air.
I am not kidding when I say that. I feel like my brain has never worked so hard reading a book. That could also just be a personal problem, but suffice to say my brain is maxed out. But I would like to say I demand a scribe patch as a reward for all of our time. And I would like Riddick to sew it onto my jacket.
Wait, shut up. That's the best idea I've ever heard. Like legit, I want a patch for this.
Yeah, literally.
Dead serious. So guys, we've been working on some things behind the scenes, and so we were adding up like how many hours we've done TOG and this one. And we have over, I think, almost 120 published hours of episodes. After this episode, I'm sure it'll be over 30 in Onyx Storm, which is insane. And that doesn't include the actual time recording, editing, etc. And we cut a lot of stuff out of our episodes, believe it or not. So we're good. We have lived in this world for a long time.
PhD in Onyx Storm. So, as a quick reminder, we are a spoiler-free podcast. But now that we know everything, no more need for a spoiler warning. We're still going to give one. We are obviously discussing chapters 61 through 66 specifically. But since we are done, it's safe to say the entire book, as well as Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, will be referenced in our discussion today. Obviously, if you are not caught up, then definitely stop here and then come back when you are. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. So I actually have some really bad news, guys. And I'm so sorry, Addison. I wasn't supposed to leave you alone with the podcast. We had so many goals, like interviewing authors and starting a book club and live events. But now I fear that may not happen. I recently went to the doctor and received an unsettling diagnosis. At this time, they don't have much information about it, and it's considered a medical anomaly. So I was sitting on the couch reading a couple days ago when my boyfriend asked me if I wanted some ice cream. I was like, hell yeah. But then he started looking at me funny and asked when my eyes looked really weird. Naturally, I was like, nothing is wrong with me. I'm perfect. But he insisted I go look. So I call my dogs into the bathroom with me because, emotional support. And what do I see? Red rims around my irises. I start to panic because how did this happen? This was all some silly little fable. It was never supposed to happen in real life. And then, right as I was deep in my despair, my phone pings and it's a text from Addison. At first, I'm so confused because she's so excited. And it's like so jarring because I'm like, no, everything is bad. My life is over. But she's ranting and raving about all these new reviews we got. And that's when it all clicked. I remembered I'd manifested this for myself because some of y'all just had to put in some more reviews. And now I am a venom. The most recent reviews and star ratings they powered me up against my will. And nothing could be done about it. So, surprise, guys, I am now a venom. If Birkenstock Berwyn comes to get me, just know that it's your fault.
Lorraine, I did not read this part of the outline in advance. And so you actually gave me a small heart attack. And
that
I
was
like,
the point.
This is something we probably should have discussed in private, not live on the air. Oh my God.
What a fun story. I got you guys. And I got Addison too. No, but actually, like, for real, thank you guys so much for listening and taking the time to leave a review or DM us. There is no thrill like the excitement of connecting with someone who listens to the pod. So, very happy. I'm Venom, but I'm happy, you know?
The question is now, will Addison turn for love? The love of Lorraine. Tune in next week to find out.
The saga of the Book Talk Fantasy podcast. Anyways, as we've been talking about, we will be releasing a separate episode to wrap up the book with our overall rating and our thoughts. And then we also plan to do a theories episode. So if there are any topics you want us to dive into, or, you know, if you have a die on this hill theory that you want us to shout out, then definitely make sure you send us a DM or email us so we can make sure we address it. All right. So that's all for housekeeping. And let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report where Addison will summarize each chapter, and next we will convene a meeting of the assembly where we will deep dive, analyze, and theorize each chapter. And finally, to end the episode, we will share our favorite moments from the set of chapters discussed. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
I will as soon as my heart stops racing. Jesus Christ, Lorraine.
With panic, she delivers
with
the book report.
Absolute panic, horror, despair. All right. Chapter 61. We switch to Rhiannon's POV as she leads the squad to protect the civilians climbing the Medaro Pass. Rhiannon shows her incredible strategic and leadership skills as she assesses the situation. Thanks and all, but not really because I still haven't forgiven you for Traeger. That infernal wind stopped, but of course, it stopped just in time for the rain to start. 17 wyvern approach the cliffs and Rhiannon gives orders and prepares for the attack. Rhiannon and Fierge, who is vicious, cunning, and downright sassy, take down several wyvern, and she resolves that they will hold the pass even in the gods' forsaken rain. Chapter 62. We're back with Violet as she faces off, literally, with Theophanie. Violet headbutts Theo, giving her the leverage she needs to escape from her grasp, but the victory is short-lived as Theophanie begins to draw from the ground. But Violet will not die on this field, and definitely not today. She cleverly deduces if she stands on top of a dead wyvern body, then she can't be desiccated. Then, out of nowhere, Sigale appears, scooping Violet up in her claws. She then tosses Violet into the air, and for a heart-stopping moment, Violet falls. But Tairn catches her. Realizing she's lost the advantage, Theophanie flees to the safety of the mountainside behind 100 wyvern and 11 venom. The only way to Theo is through, so Violet wields and strikes repeatedly, killing over 30 wyvern. Violet then notices Auric returning on Mulvik, and Tairn informs Violet the advance party from Zelna is 30 minutes out. The city just has to hold until reinforcements arrive, leaving Violet with a difficult decision. Help hold the city or confront Theophanie. Violet remembers they have one objective, one goal, and so she commands Tairn to fly for Theophany. Chapter 63. If chaos were a place, it would be Dreythus. We switch to Imogen's perspective as she fights to help protect the airspace above Dreythus, and things are not going well. Despite Glaine's impressive kill count of 16 or 17, depending on who you ask, the riders are still outnumbered and outmatched. Glaine and Imogen break orders to help Bodhi and Cure as they are attacked by 3 wyverns, and Imogen notices dark wielders headed toward the tower where Quinn is working, weaving new wards. Imogen makes the split-second decision to dismount to help save Quinn. To her surprise, Daddy Dane appears at her side and the two race towards the dark wielder, only to have him spray a stream of fire towards them. Imogen had no choice, so she took Dane's shield and used her second Signet earth-wielding to turn it into stone. She and Dane will definitely be talking about what just happened later, as will we. Imogen makes it to the tower and sees Quinn is projecting to confuse the venom. Quinn and Imogen both throw their daggers, striking the venom in the chest. As Imogen prepares to celebrate with Quinn, she has the horrifying realization that the venom blade made it into her chest. With only moments, they say the most devastating goodbyes. Instead of, "It's been my honor," it's, "We made it a good one."
Oh,
I know. Garrick appears and distance wields them both out of there to where Trissa and Felix are attempting to weave new wards. Realizing the only way to survive this is to get the wards up and running, Imogen tells Glaine to tell every rider to get there and disarm to help power the wards. Chapter 64. Theophany uses the storm to force Tairn and Violet exactly where she wants them, destroying Violet's conduit in the process. Suddenly, a large net with weights the size of desks attached to it drop onto Violet and Tairn, and they rapidly fall towards the ground. Luckily for us, Tairn and Violet both survive the fall. Unluckily for Violet, Theophany is relentless. Violet quickly finds a rune she has tempered, and it surprisingly works. She is also reminded of the strange package Ark had Sloane deliver. She opens it and sees a cryptic message from the High Priestess of Dune's temple in Erasia, as well as what appears to be a carved stone dagger. Tyrion is still fighting to free himself from the net, and so Violet dismounts to buy him some time. Violet tries to strike Theo over and over again, but she's too damn fast. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a wave of shadows, an Onyx Storm, if you will, races over the entire city and quickly engulfs the field in the mountainside in darkness. Violet finally puts all the pieces together and realizes that she can kill Theophanie with a special dagger made of Dunne's temple. Lighting up the darkness with her lightning, she sees Theophanie stumble and then smack into an invisible wall. But not just any wall, a wall of scales that shimmer and turn the same silver blue of her lightning strike. And Darna is back. But there was no time to celebrate. Violet charged towards Theophanie, stabbing her in the chest. Turns out, Dunne is a wrathful goddess to high priestesses who turned their back on her. Theophanie desiccated in an instant. Woo!
Ding dong! The witch is dead.
That's a pretty good one. I like that. Chapter 65. We switch to Xaden's perspective, and spoiler alert, things go very badly, terribly, horribly wrong. Berwin calls Xaden to a hidden canyon where he traps Sigale under a net. But Xaden isn't alone. He's there with that traitor, Pancheck, and his new quote-unquote brother. Xaden fights the urge to turn, but loses the fight the moment Berwin threatens Sigale. Xaden drops to the ground and begins to channel, unleashing the Onyx Storm over all of Drathis and the surrounding areas. Xaden then asks if Sigale will forsake him, and he opens his mind to her, showing her his plan. She agrees to try to persuade Tyrion, knowing his decision would determine their fates. Xaden and Sigale were airborne in less than a minute. Last chapter, guys! Chapter 66. Brennan races down the steps of Ryerson House shouting Violet's name, but something isn't right. Her head is fuzzy and slow. And how the hell did she end up here? And what time is it? Brennan asks Violet where she has been, but before she can answer, they are interrupted when another rider shows up to debrief Brennan. Turns out a lot of things aren't adding up. There are 4 riders still missing, 4 dead paired riders, and 3 elders. Xaden is nowhere to be found, and 6 eggs are missing from the hatching grounds. Violet then notices a piece of parchment tucked in the front pocket that carries the seal of Dunne. Turns out that piece of parchment goes perfectly with the wedding ring that is now on Violet's finger. Brennan opens the missive and tells Violet that it is an official blessing of her legally binding marriage to Xaden. Included on the parchment was a note from Xaden. "Don't look for me, it's yours now." Violet couldn't think straight. It was almost as if someone had fucked with her. Violet looked at Imogen and asked her what she did. Imogen answered, "What you asked me to." End of book. And that officially concludes the final book report for Onyx Storm.
Oh my god.
OMGY.
Why?
Wow.
I can't believe that that's how this ended.
I
will say that much because I was like, wait, that's it? That's all we get?
Oh, yeah. It's like you're reading the book and you read that and you're like, okay, and you turn the page and you're like, no. And you just keep flipping through and you're like, that can't be it. Yep. No. Yeah. And then here's what you do. You close the book, you take a deep breath, you put it on your shelf, and then you just Imogen mind wipe yourself. No, and you just skip away and pretend like you didn't read that.
Oh.
That's what I did. As soon as we're done with recording these series episodes, I'm going to pretend like I never read Onyx Storm. But like, I never heard of it. That's so crazy. And then I won't
No, you're not. That's a lie.
Again. I won't read it until the final book comes out, so I don't have to live in this perpetual state of unknowing. So that's how I'm going to deal with it. We all cope in different
That's probably healthier, than what most people did. It seems like most people were very upset by this ending and they like chuck their books at the wall or something of the sort, You
can't hurt the book. It's not the book's fault.
Isn't it, though?
It's Rebecca Yarros' fault.
Oh my gosh. Well, we, of course, have so much to talk about. So thank you for that wonderful book report. And now, of course, it's time for us to convene our assembly meeting, starting with our overarching thoughts. First of all, I've said it already, but I'll say it again. We are done!
I know it seems like we're happy to be done, guys, and like in a way we are, because as I mentioned earlier, we've spent a lot of time in this world. So we're sad it's over, but we're also happy to move on to something else, because 3 months is a long time to basically think about this 24/7. So
yes.
I started to type that I have no words, but quickly realized that is 100% a lie, because we have about 68 pages worth of words about this set of chapters. And in fact, originally, we had so many words about this book series that it inspired us to start a podcast. I also started to type, I don't want to brag, but that is in fact a lie. I do want to brag. We were right about so much shit. And I just want to take a moment to bask in that because to name a few things that we were right about, Panchik is a traitor. We were right about Arik being a precog. We were right about Violet and Xaden getting married. And we were right about someone being an Earthwielder, which I would like to point out that we called based on a single line back in chapter 7. So we do deserve that patch.
The scribe quadrant awaits. Also, stuff about Theo and her dedication in Umbriel and all that stuff too.
Well, we weren't right about that. You were right about that. Because I was like, Jesus, take the wheel. Okay, or Dunne, take the wheel, I guess.
Dunne, take the wheel.
I have many overarching thoughts about how this book ends and really about the book as a whole. But if Lorraine and I were to share those now, it would be like 5 hours long. And ain't nobody got time for that. So we will be releasing an end of book wrap up where we'll talk about our likes, dislikes, etc. for Onyx Storm as a whole. For those of you who have listened to TOG coverage, we did this for all of the books we've covered in that series so far. The wrap up episode for Onyx Storm will be structured in the same way. So we hope you guys will tune in for that. There are, of course, many big questions and theories left to discuss, and we will definitely be talking about them in this episode. But as Lorraine mentioned in housekeeping, next week we'll also be releasing an Onyx Storm theories episode. And so if there are any theories or questions you'd like us to discuss, text us, email us, or DM us. I just want to reiterate that because we've already had a couple of you message us, and we're excited. We need to start our research. So I have 2 more quick things. Just a fair warning. It's about to get mushy in here, so everyone prepare yourself.
I saw this big block of text on the outline, and I wanted to look so bad because I was like, wait, is this a theory? Like, is she presenting a theory? Yeah, I was like, what is this? I was really intrigued.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't look because I was wondering. Because every once in a while, sometimes I take a little quick sneak peek at your invisible ink. Just like once or twice. On accident. It was an accident, sort of, kind of. Anyway, all right. Well, just forget I said that. Okay.
Lady whistle down over here. Indeed.
For real, though. Before we wrap up our deep dive of Onyx Storm, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize Lorraine for all of her incredible hard work and dedication to the podcast. When I first had the idea to start Book Done Fantasy, Lorraine came up with a name. So really my idea was like, let's start a podcast. I truly had no idea what it would entail or how much work it would be. And I definitely at the time did not realize how important it would be to have the right person to do it with. But I could not have picked a better partner if I tried. To this day, I still can't believe I was like, hey, quick question for you. Do you want to start a podcast with me? And without even a moment's hesitation, you were like, yes, absolutely. And that spontaneous yes turned into one of the best decisions I've ever made. You work harder than anyone I know. Your passion and your drive and your commitment and the way you care so deeply about the community we're building and the people listening truly makes this podcast what it is. Week after week, you show up with so much enthusiasm and thoughtfulness, and it pushes me to be better. You are the reason this podcast feels like home. Violet has Xaden, and I have you. I gotta be honest, I thought that was like super cheesy, but I was like, oh, wait, I can tie this into Onyx Storm. I can do it.
Always gonna tie in the Onyx Storm.
I just wanted to say thank you for taking this sleep with me. And thank you for being the steady, brilliant, hilarious force behind the mic. And thank you for making this journey so much fun. Happy 1 year to us and happy Onyx Storm finale. I wouldn't want to do this with anyone else. And if you turn venom, which I just found out that you did just moments before, then I too will turn venom for the same reasons Xaden did. Love. Yes. And guys, I typed this before. I didn't know she was going to do that whole thing at the beginning, so I already said I would. So tune in next week to see what happens. I don't know. I'm sure it'll strike me.
We're both going to Birkenstock Berlin soon.
No, I wanted Theo to be my teacher. Damn it, Violet.
Did we want Theo to be our teacher, though? Oh, let's be our own teachers. We're going to be our own venom faction.
Oh, let's have Xaden be our teacher.
Oh, Professor Zaddy Ryerson. How could we forget? Wow.
Professor
Wait,
Xaden.
Oh my god. Okay, this was so cute, though.
I love
Xaden. Yeah. Oh, this is so cute, though. Wow, now I feel bad because I didn't have a response tweeted. I didn't have a response ready because I didn't know you were going to write this.
Well, that was the point. I didn't want you to have to write something. I felt it in my heart for you. And I was like, I got to say something. Plus, I mean, I missed our 1 year anniversary and it's the end of the book and it just felt like the perfect time to throw it in.
Oh, what? No, but this is perfect. And I truly do feel the same. I mean, Addison and I mostly spend the majority of our time laughing or like sending each other like random thoughts and shit about this
Oh, yeah.
book.
If you guys looked at our text history, you'd be so confused because like we'll get on the phone and get off the phone. And then there's like this weird breakup in the conversation. I don't know. We have a crazy way to communicate, but it works for us.
It's our way of communicating.
Except that time you blocked me and I thought you wanted to quit the podcast.
Oh, yeah, guys. One time I accidentally blocked us. And I didn't know I did it. And I just thought I wasn't hearing her because she's really busy. So I was like, oh, whatever. And I didn't stress about it. And then, a few days go by and I'm like, oh, maybe I should ask. And so I tried to message her and then she starts messaging on Instagram. Or I think we start going on there because we're like, what the heck is going on? I'm not getting any of these messages. Maybe it's because I'm in the mountains. Like my signal's bad or something like that. No, I just accidentally blocked her.
No. Okay, guys. Why she wasn't stressing. I literally was like, oh my God, Lorraine wants to quit the podcast and she doesn't know how to tell me. Because I was blowing her up. Like the first day or two, I was like, be chill, be chill, be chill. Lorraine has a life. And by the end of it, I was like, are you alive? And so actually I messaged her from my personal Instagram to the Booked on Fantasy one. And then that didn't work. Then I looked at our notes and she'd been working on notes. And I'm like, why would she be working on the notes if she wants to quit? That just doesn't make any sense. And I literally started typing on our shared doc. And I'm like, are you alive? I've been texting you for days. Yeah, Lorraine literally almost gave me a heart attack. She ruined my weekend that week because I was so upset. But I still love you.
Meanwhile, I had no idea. I was totally oblivious. So.
No idea. It was a dark.
It was my
few
fault.
Days.
But we're back and we're better than
baby.
ever.
That's right.
Stronger than ever.
Never block me again, I swear.
She's gonna feed me to a dragon.
I sure will.
Feed me to the gale. Probably a wyvern.
It depends. Depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Okay, I swear we're almost done. And just a fair warning, I just need to be mushy for just a little bit longer, so please bear with me. I just want to take a minute to thank you guys for listening. This past year has been such a magical ride for both Lorraine and I, and we truly would not be here without your support. Whether you've been with us since episode 1 or found us somewhere in the middle of our throw-to-glass spiral or picked up with us when we started Onyx Storm, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for showing up, for pressing play, for letting us be a part of your world for hours, plural, because we know our episodes are long as fuck. They are. We try, guys. We try to keep them short, but anyway. Your DMs, your comments, your theories, your emails, and your reviews, literally just everything, means so much to us. You've turned this podcast into more than a 2-person deep dive. You've helped us build a community of people who just get it. We're so grateful for every download, every share, every message that has made us laugh or cry or squeal with excitement, or all of the above, to be honest. You've made this past year unforgettable, and we can't wait to keep reading, laughing, and screaming into the void. Mostly screaming into the void for this episode, gonna be honest. So, yeah. Here's to year 2, and here's to you.
Yay! Cheers, guys!
Yay! Onyx Storm! Onyx Storm!
Onyx Storm! Onyx Storm! Well, wow. Lots of feelings, lots of emotions.
I know.
But those were great. I'm glad you said all that. It makes me feel very warm and fuzzy inside.
Me too. Which is good, because by the end of this, I think I'll feel dead inside.
No, remember, you're going to forget about this. And
You're right. You're totally. I'm going to close the book, close the laptop, and be like, no, I've never read Fourth Wing. What's that?
Yeah. But anyways, to keep it moving here. So that concludes our overarching, very heartfelt thoughts. And now we can move on to our regular chapters, starting with chapter 61 of the excerpt. This was from a work titled Leadership for Second Years by Major Pippa Donnins. She differentiates between command and squads. And she says command is built on respect, rules, and obedience. Squads are built on trust. I think this speaks really well to the events of this chapter and what we've seen from Second Squad versus the whole command structure of Bisgayeth and the Riders. Command has a couple varieties of application. You have, command with respect to leadership and hierarchies or rankings for an entire war college or the army. Military organizations are often known to be places that prioritize respect, rules, and obedience because that's what you kind of need to get everyone as a whole working toward the same thing. You also have command in terms of giving or taking command, which involves giving orders and instructions that are expected to be followed because everyone following those instructions understands the rules collectively and have been trained to follow the leadership structure. However, when you scale down to a small team, like a squad, for example, the priority shifts to one of trust because these are people that you work with the most and they are always fighting and training next to you for everything. The most successful squads, I would imagine, are ones with the highest amount of trust between members because they can rely on everyone else to just do what they say they're going to do, like our little partnership.
Yay! I think this excerpt is especially poignant for Second Squad and a theme of this book so far. Early on in the book, during Signet sparring, we saw Second Squad had the most success because they worked together, and more importantly, they trusted one another. As we progress through Onyx Storm, I feel like there has been a lot of conversations surrounding the balance between following orders versus protecting your squad and doing what you think is best for the mission, and I think this excerpt speaks to that overall theme of the book.
In relation to this chapter, we've seen throughout Onyx Storm how Rhiannon as a squad leader has been learning to take command and therefore relies on obedience from other riders to follow instructions so everyone can complete the mission successfully. On the other hand, we see her frustration with people that don't follow instructions at times. For example, Arik and Sloane flying off a couple chapters ago to help Mira and deliver that package to Violet. Of course, we also see that within the squad, Rhiannon instinctively trusts her squad mates to handle their business. She trusts Violet will complete her mission. She trusts Riddick and Sawyer to fight off the wyverns as they see fit. And she trusts, the flyers in the first years on the ground to protect the pass. But most importantly, she just trusts that everyone has each other's backs.
Another thing I liked about this excerpt is that this is the most Rhiannon thing ever. As soon as I read the title, Leadership for Second Years, I was like, yep, 1,000,000%. Rhiannon has read that book so many times. The binding is probably broken. We know that Rhi cares so much about her squad mates and helping them all be successful. And so, I don't know, I just got kind of tickled by that because this is so Rhi-coded.
Yes. Immediately when I saw we were getting a POV from Rhiannon, I was pumped. I loved getting more insight into another rider and a dragon's relationship. And I especially just loved getting to see Rhi do her thing as a squad leader. So
yeah, I totally agree. And to be honest, I was not expecting this at all. I thought we'd stick with Violet the whole time and then get one Xaden POV at the end, like Rebecca Yarros did in Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. So I was really shocked when we got not only Rhiannon's, but then Imogen's. And I was like, whoa.
Yes. She's treating us extra special in this book, I guess. Just very quickly, timeline-wise, we can assume Rhiannon's POV is occurring 2/3 of the way through chapter 60 after Violet knocks Theophanie down with the Marasite arrow, because that causes the storm to temporarily die down a bit. To add more context, Rhi notes that Taryn and Marb flew out with Tiny just before Theophanie's windstorm first started. Rhi also mentions that she'd received a report from Kath that Xaden and Bodhi were spotted near Drathis' city walls. Also, I would like to call back to Violet's final thought at the end of chapter 60 when she tells Theophanie she doesn't have to be everywhere, then thinks, when push comes to shove, I'm not the best, she is. I definitely think that was a reference to Rhiannon. We jump straight into her POV next, and we know Theophanie was taunting Violet because she noticed Violet looking southward after that horde of wyvern flew off, presumably to the pass where the rest of the squad is. I think Violet was showing that she trusts Rhi to lead the squad while she focuses on her one mission against Theophanie.
That makes a lot of sense and fits perfectly with the squads are built on trust part of the excerpt. I feel like this is also a callback to the conversation Rhiannon and Violet had back in chapter 23 of Fourth Wing, when Violet is telling her about her kiss with Xaden, and Rhiannon says, "But Violet, he's not the most powerful rider of our generation. You are." She holds my gaze just long enough to let me know she means it. I think in this moment, Violet is remembering that conversation and she's thinking to herself, I'm not the best. She is. And she being Rhiannon.
Oh.
I know. When I remembered that, I was like, oh.
So Rhi is given a large task of protecting the Medaro Pass for civilians, but she is down 3 of her most powerful battle-hardened squad mates, referring to Imogen, Violet, and Quinn. So Rhi's direct squad consists of Riddick, Sawyer, Kat, Marin, Bragan, Nev, and the first-year riders Arik, Sloane, Avalyn, Lynx, and Baylor. We know Violet is with Theophanie in the northern field, while Imogen and Quinn were part of the group defending the airspace over Drathis itself. Theophanie's windstorm has temporarily delayed any movement because it grounded both dragons and wyverns, but with its current pause, the wyvern once again approach. I found it interesting that Rhi thinks about Zanal, noting her twin sister always says Zanal gives what he sees fit, and then thinks, no use thanking the god for one blessing and cursing him in the next breath. I don't recall Rhi ever mentioning that she favors a specific god in particular, but I am just noting this because A, the thoughts fit the scene, And B, maybe Zanal is helping them out just a little bit because Reagan seems to sort of trust him in a way, Reagan being Reed's twin sister. And just after this, she thinks, we lucked out when the wyvern that crashed the holes I left in our defenses only took out the wall and not my parents' house.
I noted this too, and as you guys know, we are on high alert for Godwatch. It's unclear if Rhiannon and her family strongly prefer Zanal, but the fact that she thinks Reagan always says implies that Zanal is a god regularly discussed in their home. So I don't know in terms of like how strongly in the world building people favor a god, but it does seem like that is talked about frequently and has been in Rhiannon's household as she is grown up.
I also found it interesting. Reese sees Riddick staring at the northern peak, like he could see straight through the thing if he tried hard enough, then thinks, no matter how much Violet means to me, she's one life. We're guarding thousands who are fleeing as my family had, and we owe them the same protection. This whole scene immediately made me think back to Quest Squad. I can only imagine Riddick's worry because he's the one who told Violet bad things happen when we aren't together, and that's why he joined the squad so Violet would have a squad mate to watch her back. You know that he would go help if he could, but as the mission dictates, his job is to stay in the pass and follow Rhee's lead. Then you also have Rhee, who is fighting her own emotions between being there with Violet as well. Rhee didn't even think twice about following Violet to Dune's temple, and even took off after Theophanie without a second thought. But now she has orders from command, and she's got her own command to take charge of in terms of the direct mission that they've been tasked with in the pass.
I also noticed when Rhee thinks she's out there in the one condition I never want any of us, alone. And I think this just really reinforces the core of Second Squad, and that is that they really are better together.
Oh.
It's just like Riddick said at the beginning of Onyx Storm, bad things happen when they aren't together. This has got to be really hard for Rhee, because she is so bound by like honor and duty and responsibility. But then there's this internal conflict for her of like, I have a responsibility to my squad mates and the people I love and care about. And so, I don't know, I was really proud of Rhee, but then I was like really sad and all the feelings, so many feelings.
Yeah. Iron Squad forever.
We want a patch.
So just a quick side note about Fierce, though. I did feel like she was very on brand in terms of being a green dragon with her logic. She's both compassionate, but also pretty level-headed when she tells Rhee, acknowledging your fear for the lightning wielder does not compromise you. Ignoring it does. Accept the emotion and move on.
I gotta be totally honest. I forgot everything I knew about green dragons until this very moment, so thank you for pointing that out.
At this point, we get the note that Taryn and Marb were spotted transporting Tiny, while Xaden and Bodhi are spotted by the city walls. So we know that Kara swooped Bodhi up in Chapter 60, but we don't know where he went from there. Based on this detail, Kara must have taken Bodhi to join Xaden and Sigale, at least for the time being.
And we're noting this because knowing what we know now about the missing riders and the new brother at the end, we want to establish a timeline in everyone's location as much as possible. So we're going to be pointing out a lot of these like seemingly mundane details, but it's so we can build this as tight as possible timeline because it all goes to who the new brother is.
Yes. And part of that, too, we've kind of been going back and trying to listen to Rebecca Yarros' Denver tour interview as we could before we started recording this podcast. And one of the things that she did say is to be on the lookout for who's missing at the end to help us figure out who the new brother might be. And then she also mentioned you need to be thinking about who feels like what they were given was not enough. So those are like the two clues for us to keep in mind as we finish these last 6 chapters. So after a report from Baylor that there are 17 wyvern approaching, Rhee instructs the riot, aka Sawyer and Riddick, to launch with her in a thorn formation, leaving the flyers to guard the evacuees and the first-year riders to continue helping civilians at the top of the pass. I loved when Rhee said, "That's a little menacing," about the wyvern, and Fier's response, "Then let us be menaces."
That was actually one of my favorite quotes, probably from the entire book. And I, for real, want a shirt that says that. Just that, let us be menaces. Because I feel like you can apply that to so many different things. And I kind of love it.
Yes. Chaos Queens.
Chaos
forever.
Queens.
I also thought it was very classic of Cat to question orders, but I like that Rhea navigates it with a rational response to explain that, they have better maneuverability against the cliff and runes to use as well. That was very leaderly of Rhea.
It really was. She just exudes confidence and leadership. If she's not a wing leader next year, I'm gonna be.
We're gonna riot.
We're gonna riot. We're gonna start a revolution.
Sure will. So Rhea, Riddick, and Sawyer take off straight for the wyvern, and then they switch from a thorn to a vertical formation to help them take down more of the wyvern that are approaching. Fierce is so quietly judgmental. I found it to be kind of funny. If she was a human, she'd be pulling down her sunglasses halfway and giving Rhea that look where she doesn't even have to say anything for you to tell that she's judging you, And mostly I just thought it was hilarious when she tells Rhea, second guessing your choices makes me do the same regarding threshing.
It just hit me as you were saying that. You know who she kind of reminds me of? Meryl Streep from The Devil Wears Prada.
Oh, yeah.
She kind of gives that energy, the sunglasses down. Bore someone else with your questions.
Yeah.
That kind of vibe. Or the iconic, by all means, move at a glacial pace. You know how that thrills me. That's very
Yeah.
Fierce was just relentlessly sassy. And honestly, I did think it was funny, but at the same time, I was like, girl, quit giving Rhiannon a hard time. You need to focus, okay? You're literally fighting for your lives. Maybe this is not the best time,
Right. The riot begins taking down the wyvern. And again, I just loved getting these battle scenes because they're just so cool. How Rhea manages to stay on while Frierge rolls and then barrels into a wyvern. I'll never know. Must be some strong thighs because it definitely is not a saddle. I also like that we get some tactical strengths of the dragons as well. Rhea notes that Fierge primarily relies on her agility because brute strength isn't really her forte. And meanwhile, we see that Ashram is pretty speedy and outflies the flames of the wyvern chasing him.
It's really interesting to read about how different dragons maneuver. I think I'm just so used to Terran being this unstoppable, all-powerful behemoth that I forget that not all dragons are like that. They're not all giant, super fast, ultra powerful. And so a lot of times they have to play to their strengths, right? They have to make adjustments based on their weaknesses in that. And so I did think that was really interesting to actually see how other dragons fight.
And speaking of other dragons and their strengths, we have Riddick and Atrum, and I thought that little maneuver was so cool. Atrum rolls and puts his back to the wyvern, and then Riddick just reaches out and then he freezes the wyvern. It was especially cool because this was a callback to the scene in chapter 20 where Riddick shows Violet that he can freeze an orange solid because he trained his Signet and learned to freeze the water inside an object, in addition to just generally being able to draw water out of the air. So I was really excited to see him apply this to killing a wyvern.
Dude, yes. I have been waiting for the entire book for that to come up again. I really thought Riddick was going to do that on the Quest Squad mission at some point. Or to a Venom or something. And he never did it. So I was a little disappointed. So I was really glad that Rebecca Yarros tied that back in. And it was so badass. Something about that maneuver, picturing it in my mind, that is so Atrum, right? To do something almost comically insane, but super cool and effective. It just fits really well.
Also, as a side thought about Signet, do you think Rhea could just summon the rune within a wyvern at some point? Because theoretically, if she removes the rune, would it kill the wyvern too? Or, would she have to go a step further and then also nullify the rune to actually kill the wyvern?
That's a good question. To me, I think of the rune as the heartbeat of the wyvern. So if you removed it, in my opinion, it's an empty shell not powered by any kind of magic. So it would just fall to the ground. Either way, I love that thought. That would be so freaking cool and so helpful. I think she would need to train her Signet more, but I don't see why she couldn't. I mean, if she could remove a wing spur from
progresses
Terran's
to that.
leg. Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm here for this.
So Rhea sees Sawyer killing a wyvern, and that 7 wyvern breach the pass where Cat, Marin, Briggan, and Nav and the griffins fight them off. Notably, Marin shoots a runed arrow from her crossbow, which must be some sort of explosive fire rune because it catches the wing of the wyvern on fire. To close the chapter, Rhea gives orders to regroup into a shield formation, and I loved her thought at the end. She thinks we're down 3, but the strength of the squad is in the whole, not the individual. We will hold this pass, even in this godforsaken rain.
I gotta be honest, rereading this chapter just made me want to go, Rhiannon, Rhiannon, over and over again. I don't know what sport it would be, but I want Rhiannon competing for us in the Olympics. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because she's going to get the job done.
So yeah, that ends chapter 61. Moving on to chapter 62. The excerpts. I got very excited because obviously God Watch. This was another text from Rage of Royalty's Guide to Appeasing the Gods, and it says, there is no goddess more wrathful than Dunne. Entering her temple will slice the soul from any attendant who has shunned her grace. So first of all, note to everyone, never get on Dunne's bad side, because she don't play. Fool her once, and you just gone.
Oh, yeah. She won't smite you like any other god. She will literally slice the soul from your body. And you know what? I'm good on that. So remind me to never shun Dunne, because I don't want my soul sliced from my body.
So we already know that both Dunne and Loyal are the 2 gods who require lifetime service if you're dedicated to them, because war and love change souls irrevocably. Combined with this current excerpt, that seems to imply that not only can Dunne alter a soul, she can also destroy it if you shun her grace. That then implies to me that something about the dedication practice links or binds either all of your soul or at least a part of it to the gods. To take this further, we see in chapter 64 that Theophanie does in fact die from the special ceremonial dagger made of carved marble. And it seems like Dunne basically severed that last bit of whatever soul Theophanie had, thus truly killing her. We'll talk about this more when we get to chapter 64, but the wheels are spinning.
I love this excerpt because the first time you're reading it, you're kind of like, huh, that's interesting, but you really don't know what it means. And then when Violet finally kills her with the special Dunne dagger, you're like, oh, it finally all starts to click, because you know it's important and you know there's something to it because, you know, Dunne and Violet and the dedication and all that. But when it finally happens, it's like hits you like a bolt of lightning. You're like, okay, I get it now.
We are back with Violet and Theophanie in the northern field, just as they were when we last left them. I found Violet's words notable when she says, my friends will continue and fight long after I meet Malik, and I will meet him with my soul intact. I thought this was hilarious and kind of a slap in the face of Theophanie because, you know, she barely got any soul left, okay? If any. It's also clear that Theophanie was surprised because it really shows Violet's character. She'd rather die than turn venom, and we know that was not Theophanie's choice.
I think it also shows that Theophanie really thought that she would get Violet to turn either for love, to save her friends, or revenge. And surprise, surprise, Violet, in fact, did not.
Violet uses the opportunity to headbutt Theophanie in the nose and then kick her off of her. Theo panics and darts with venom speed 25 feet away. So side note, I was wondering, is it possible that this is all Theophanie was doing when she, apparated? In reality, she was just darting away super fast, but you couldn't tell because it was so fast.
Well, at first I was like, maybe. But then think about the 2 contexts in which we've seen her do it. When they were trying to rescue Jack, they were in a very small room. So even if she would have went all the way across the room, you would have seen her. And then outside of Dunne's temple, she and the other 2 venom disappear. So possible, but I'm going to say she probably did apparate, distance wield, whatever you want to call it. I also thought it was absolutely hilarious that she shrieks and says, that's never going to straighten out. And I think it's funny that an immortal, seemingly all-powerful being is still shallow as hell and worried about her crooked-ass nose.
She is vain.
She's a vain little thing. So now she got a crooked nose and chapped lips. So ain't nobody gonna want to marry her now.
Never. So Theo draws a green-tipped dagger. Shout out to Resin in Fourth Wing. But Violet holds her ground to challenge that Theophanie won't kill her because she needs Violet. This part of the conversation was really intriguing. Theo says, also, by the way, when we say Theo, we're just shortening Theophanie's name in case that was never clear. But we got lazy with typing out Theophanie at times, so Theo it is.
Sick of that. Okay, do you know how hard it is to type Theophany over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's not fun. So anyways, Theo says, another will come along. You are not special. And then Violet says, but I'm the only lightning wielder you have to prove yourself. And then Theo responds, which meant a lot more when you had your Irid. Theophanie's previous comments from the last set of chapters, the one where she said once a century or so, we get a chance to skew the scales in our favor. And then when she asked if she's ready to tip the balance, made it feel like Theophanie was talking about a lightning-wielding Signet tipping the balance. And it kind of seems like that's still the case. But I do wonder if the thing Theophanie was more interested in was really Andarna, both because she is an Irid, but also because of what Violet's second Signet is because of her. Theophanie has been alluding to wanting an Irid from the beginning, and that seems like it would have been the best possible outcome, because I still think about that fourth wing line in chapter 37 when the venom that stabs her says, such untapped power. You could command the sky to surrender all its power, and I bet you don't know what to do with it. I'm going to split you open and see where all of that astonishing light comes from. I would think that the venom know about the Iris being a different untapped source of power, but they just need to actually get a hold of one to figure out how to get it, or I don't know, whatever it is. I have more thoughts about this in relation to Andarna's magic that powers Violet's second Signet later, but I'm starting to feel like it's Andarna for Theophanie.
Yeah. To further bolster your point, when Andarna appears again, there's that moment where it's described that Theophanie stares at her and she's almost stunned with this look of reverence. And so I think you're onto something that she did definitely want Violet, but also what she really wanted to was access to Andarna. I feel like this opens the door for another debate of like, did they really want Xaden or Violet or both? Or did they really want Violet because of her lightning or Andarna? I'm sure Xaden, Violet, and Darna, they're the complete package.
So just as a follow-up question, what would happen to a venom if they drew from a different source of magic? Like rather than the ground, they take from the Iris or the sky.
I want to say I don't think they can pull from the sky. Because our assumption is that Venin are aware of the Irids and why they're special, aka they can pull power from the sky. So if they could, why wouldn't they have already done it? There has to be something that doesn't allow them to do it. I think that ability of pulling from the sky is specifically unique to the Irids, and that's what makes them so special. So I really don't think that they could.
Okay.
Maybe it's something about the way like nature's design of magic. Like if you're Venin, you can have all the power you want from the ground, but the true power is in the sky, or some weird balancing like that.
Yeah, I got you. That's true, because if they could, they probably would have already by now. So
yeah,
there's probably something that blocks them from being able to do it. Violet realizes that she still needed to stall while also realizing that Theo's patience was growing thin. Notably, an exhausted Xaden quickly checks in mentally, and Violet takes a moment to look toward Drathis, thinking dragons, wyvern, and griffins filled the sky above the spiral tower. We know Xaden is over by the city walls from Rhee's POV along with Bodhi, at least for now. We also know that Imogen's POV next chapter takes place in Drathis, so I think Violet seeing the dragons in the spiraling tower is some quick foreshadowing for that occurring.
Or it could be happening simultaneously. And I only point that out because I'm really trying to establish a minute-by-minute timeline here, because I will crack the code on what the hell everyone is doing and where they're doing it. And so I think it's possible there's some overlap there.
Theo takes note and asks if she worries for the Shadow Wielder, and then taunts, do you want to have forever with him? Violet responds, I already do, but Theo says not in the way you want. We're excellent actors, but our kind doesn't feel what you call love. I'm guessing not in the way you want is referring to the idea that Xaden will be immortal now as a venom, while Violet is not, thus giving forever a different meaning for them. Violet doesn't believe Theophanie, but I do think Theophanie is telling the truth with this in general. I think Xaden is an exception for now because we know his love for Violet is why he turned in the first place. And there is definitely some sort of deeper bond because of their love that helps keep Xaden grounded. But I think for most venom, especially as they move up in venom rank and lose more and more of their soul, they lose their emotions, which likely includes love as well. We've also seen Xaden flip and talk about what it was like to not feel emotions while they were in Hedonis. So Theo's probably not lying.
I agree with you. I think it's possible that maybe initiates can still feel some kind of emotional attachment, but as they progress, they definitely lose the ability to feel emotions. This did make me call back to the excerpt from chapter 48, where it's described the venom with black hair that drained an entire village but left one house standing with 3 survivors. One of them, presumably her husband, the other two, presumably her children, based on how the excerpt's worded. I wonder if this is actually indicative that Venin, even in their progression, can still feel love or some kind of attachment, because it seems likely she kept her own husband and children alive or other family members, and she did drain an entire village. And so I actually, in the context of this entire book now, I feel like we're throwing in this element of like, Xaden's too far gone, he doesn't feel love, and that's why Rebecca Yarros included this little bit with Theophanie. But that excerpt, I think we're definitely going to come back to in the next book, and it's going to show that there is some pattern or documentation that obviously we can't determine what that Venin was feeling, but that they are aware enough to not drain their own husband and children. There is still some kind of connection there that keeps them just tethered in the land of,
human emotion.
Human emotion, thank you. Because I was like, they are still technically living, but the land of human emotion, exactly.
Ooh, yes, I agree with that. So I do have to make a little God watch and foreshadowing call out to note when Violet thinks I've proved to Dunne's favored Isle that I'm anything but the weakest, while she no longer carries Dunne's favor. It implies to me that Violet now knows or guesses that she is favored by Dunne.
I think after finally putting together the priestess's meaning with the info she gets from Mira about what Grandma Niaro said, she finally realizes that she actually does have some special connection to Dunne. It just took her a really long time to put all that shit together.
This comment was bait, of course, for Theo, who now knows where Violet is most vulnerable, and this leads to her next trick. Theo says, to survive in our world, you must protect the magic that sustains you. Do you know how to keep from being drained by this method? And then she palms the ground and starts to drain slowly. She continues to say, it's simple. Occupying ground that has already had its magic repurposed creates a barrier. The easiest solution is to drain it yourself. If you do so before I get there, you'll live. You'll keep your love, at least what it masquerades as, and your power, and even your dragon if you wish. So immediately this made me think of Takaris' palace. We know he had the outdoor area made of stones that came from east of the Dunne River, aka the Barrens. And side note, Dunne River, Dunne? Is this river metaphorically leading to the idea that Dunne protects against the Venin? I mean, she is the goddess of war after all, and what has historically been the forever war? The battle against the Venin.
Ooh, I like that.
Once again, I understand that Theophanie wants Violet to turn, and if she does, she could be immortal with Xaden and still have power. But what is it with the keeping the dragon stuff? Realistically, why do the Venin kill the dragons at all? Is it just the Venin asserting their power? Because we know that the Venin want to get to the magic in the hashing grounds. But if you kill off the source of magic, what does that do for you? If the Venin win and take over long term and then they drain the continent of magic, all they're really doing is speeding up their own death, right? And so, I don't know, it's just kind of weird to me that they don't actually care that much about dragons. They're like, well, it's a perk, you'll keep them, but they don't care about them despite the fact that dragons have magic. I guess what I'm saying is that it feels like a waste because I'm like, they don't drain the dragons necessarily. They just kill them, you know? What Berwin was doing.
It is a little odd, especially because then you get into this conversation of if someone turns Venin, how do they keep control of their dragon? How do you stop the dragon? I don't know. It is a confusing topic. And you're right that Theophanie is really heavily emphasizing, with me, you could keep your dragon, with Berwin, not. The only good example I can think of is when Berwin attempts to kill Sigale. But I feel like that doesn't really answer the question because my impression of that scene, when Berwin is going to kill Sigale, he says, you're going to have to draw really deep to replace her power. And so I don't know if Berwin necessarily cared about Sigale one way or the other, but he was using the death of Sigale to force Xaden to channel even deeper. But I don't think that's necessarily the case with killing Panchek's dragon, for example. I mean, to be honest, I don't know. That's a problem.
I don't know.
It's a good question. From this conversation, I really keyed on when she said, occupying ground that has already had its magic repurposed creates a barrier. Although we pretty much knew this already because of what happens in Iron Flame at Takaris' palace and his death pit, it did make me wonder if Violet and the other riders will figure out a way to be safe on the ground. Theophanie said the magic had to be repurposed, not drained, repurposed. So maybe there will be some kind of rune or something they can do to the ground if they have to dismount and fight a Venin And I actually have a very small, I'm going to say thought experiment, not necessarily theory, about a certain someone with an earth-wielding signet that may be able to help repurpose the magic in the ground. So we'll talk about that later.
Oh, okay. Interesting. To continue, if Violet refuses to turn, Theophanie threatens that she'll die. Then she returns her palm to the ground and says, I can wait for another lightning wielder, but you're too dangerous to be left alive, so choose quickly. So this is when it really started clicking that lightning wielding as a signet isn't necessarily the main concern or attraction for the Venom, or at least for Theophanie. They know they will get another chance because at some point another lightning wielder will manifest, but there's something distinct about Violet that threatens them. I already brought Andarna up previously because as an Irid who is magic, that is an attractive thing to the Venom as a source of power for them to feed on. But then I was like, oh, wait a second. Violet can dream walk as her second signet. We know that Irids recognize that as an extremely dangerous signet, and we've been wondering why that is. Berwyn is also presumably the only other Venom with this ability, and we've talked about the potential for Violet to be able to enter into another Venom's mind in the future and learn stuff they don't want known. I think it's totally possible that Theophanie has somehow figured out that Violet is a dreamwalker. Berwyn saw Violet in Xaden's dream and knew what Violet's signet powers are, and so it's possible that maybe he alerted Theophanie. I was also wondering if it had to do with Violet being favored or touched by a god. Does Theophanie realize that Violet has an especially unique or dangerous power because of her closer relationship with Dunne? Maybe it's a combo of both things.
All of these are great possibilities. The way I see it, Violet has 5 things that are special or distinct about her. Number 1, she's a lightning wielder. Number 2, she's a dreamwalker. Number 3, she's bonded to an Irid. Number 4, she's partially dedicated and seemingly favored by Dunne. And number 5, probably the least strong one, is that she has the mind of a scribe and the heart of a writer. I'm pretty sure Theophanie does not care about the fact that she has the mind of a scribe, and she just told us she could wait for another lightning wielder. That leaves bonded to an Irid, dreamwalker, and partially dedicated to Dunne. At this moment, Theophanie knows that Andarna is gone. This leaves us with her partial dedication and being a dreamwalker. My bet is that it has to do with dreamwalking because back in chapter 41, the Irid says to Andarna, and you, our very hope, have handed this human something far more dangerous to wield, haven't you? And in this moment, Theophanie says, but you're too dangerous to be left alive. That, to me, pretty much narrows it down to it has everything to do with being a dream walker. Now, I have a crack speculation to support what I'm saying. There is no way that it is a coincidence that Violet enters Xaden's dream with Berwyn, and for the first time, Berwyn actually sees and interacts with her, and then all of this goes down immediately afterwards. I think Berwyn saw Violet, realized that she was a dreamwalker, and was like, oh shit, this actually makes her too dangerous. He then tells Theophanie and possibly, or probably, the big bad head honcho Venom, and they're like, yep, it's time to act. We either need to turn Violet or kill her. Either way, something has to be done. And that's what precipitated them hatching this plan with Mira and Drathus, etc. Because they've been, for months and months, toying with Xaden and Violet in the dreams, popping up, leaving notes. So what made them finally be like, I'm tired of waiting? And I think it has everything to do with her being a dreamwalker.
I think so too. I like how you said it was a crack theory, but we talked about this, so it's definitely not a crack theory. I totally agree. Nobody else knows about Violet's second signet except for Xaden and Berwyn now, so presumably it was Berwyn that informed Theophanie of it with their collective Venom conscience or whatever the heck is going on. So back to the action. Violet realizes that she needs to GTFO the ground, and she cleverly remembers that wyverns would count as something that has had its magic repurposed, and she sprints to climb to one. I thought this was really crazy because of the implications. Violet makes it onto the wyvern and sees the wave of desiccation ripple underneath her and continue on without affecting her. So, remember when we were wondering last episode about what it meant when Theophanie said it takes forever to generate wyvern. Then when you combine that comment with this additional information about how things that have already had their magic repurposed can be barriers to prevent further draining, I wonder if this does actually mean that wyvern were formerly dragons that were drained sometime in the past. Then either using the runes, magic, or a combination of both, generating them means that they were actually just re-imbued with power or reanimated using the runes that the venom put in them. The wyvern are also gray colored, and we know draining something of magic does steal the color away and turn it to like a paler or like a grayish color. Also, you brought up repurposing. I took that to mean she was just talking about draining based off of the context, but then I do wonder if Theo was just being crafty with her language or if repurposing does have other meanings that we don't know about yet.
I think it could be either, honestly. I think that's one of those could be super important, could be nothing. And we just kind of have to wait and see how it goes.
Right.
I feel like all of your logic here is super sound, especially about the wyvern turning gray, which happens when you drain them of magic and color. My only hang up to this theory is the logistics. At Drathis alone, it seems like they have hundreds of wyvern, and I just don't think they could reasonably kill and collect that many dragons without anyone noticing. That's my only hang up, because of course we don't have good info on what is the population of dragons and over time how many die and all that. But I just feel like someone would notice if dragon bodies started disappearing. Like someone would have pieced that together by now. I like the idea and I think the logic is sound. It's just that little logistical piece that I'm like, I don't know.
Right. So before Theo can try another trick, Sigale, of all dragons, swoops up Violet with a sassy comment that says, "You are an inconvenience for which there is no adequate measurement, but you have done an excellent job keeping the Maven occupied." I do think that's probably the closest thing we'll ever get to approval from Sigale, but...
I was going to say, I think that's actually the nicest thing I've ever heard Sigale say to literally anyone.
It becomes clear that she'd temporarily left Xaden just to help Violet, and then she passes her off to Taryn. As a side note, just for like a tiny, brief, 2 seconds, and I feel like a very unfaithful reader for this very momentary thought. But when I first read this, I was reading just so fast that I didn't fully process everything. And I, for a split second, was like, oh my god, Sigale is betraying Violet, and she was going to toss her back to Theophanie.
No, you didn't, Lorraine. How dare you? How dare you?
In the back of your mind, you know something is happening with Xaden. It seemed pretty likely he's going to turn ASEM or whatever it is, right? And then you're like, we've had these conversations about what happens to the dragons. Is he going to flip the bond and have control? You know what I mean? And so you're just juggling all these things. It was a split second panic. But then, of course, that was not the case. And I was like, oh, okay, thank God. We're still in the clear.
That is so funny. Well, I'm glad that Sigale didn't turn like you did. You little venom.
Yeah, I know.
I will say this scene is so cool. It is, you know what? It's cool as fuck. And
that's true.
It's actually kind of funny to picture Taryn and Sigale, these massive dragons, sort of playing catch with Violet. They're tossing her back and forth, wee.
Yeah.
And you're really relying on a lot of trust in both of them to toss you through the air. Because if one tiny thing goes wrong, you did. So
true.
Crazy. Absolutely unhinged.
The massive black void that is Taryn then appears and plucks Violet from freefall and oh so lovingly says, "I told you to stay on the field, but in this case, I'm relieved you did not listen."
As always, I'm forever establishing everyone's alibi except for Bodhi's, because I know you're the brother. Violet asks how Tiny he is, and Taryn says, quickly recovering under Brennan's care at the top of the pass. So it seems like after Brennan saves Mira, he takes her somewhere, presumably at the top of the pass, or maybe where Felix and Trissa are waving the wards, but he takes Mira somewhere to recover. And then he stays there, or presumably goes to the top of the pass to help manage the battle strategy and mend injured riders, flyers, and civilian as they make their way through the top of the pass. So I feel like that establishes Brennan's timeline, alibi, etc.
So Taryn tosses Violet onto his back, and they catch up on Tiny's status. Theophany's storm wielding, and that in the south, a horde of wyvern just launched, leaving behind a line of 11 venom and their wyvern. I find it interesting that Theophany is on an enormous wyvern because I honestly just assumed that the wyvern were all uniform in size and that the only thing that differentiates them is their fire color and I guess their speed. But I do wonder how Theophany ended up with a massive wyvern. Is this because it was just generated quote unquote for longer and therefore became much bigger? Or if we go with the idea that these wyvern were former dragons, perhaps this was a massive dragon in the past. I don't know. Just some side thoughts. I also thought Taryn's comments about offering Farsight kind of noteworthy. He says the privilege of our sight is afforded to few. I wonder why the dragons don't offer their sight or perspective to their riders more often, just because it seems like it would be pretty useful at times. But this does indicate that dragons rarely offer their sight, and it's a very special thing. Taryn and Adarna have both deemed Violet worthy enough of seeing through their eyes, but we also know Liam and Fourthwing developed Farsight as a signet, so that's just kind of interesting to me. Is there something about dragon sight that is unique outside of the fact that it's just far better than human sight?
We've debated about how writers actually manifest their signets based on what the Irid said. Do the dragons actually choose what to give their writers? It seems like based on Taryn's comment here, Farsight is in fact a very distinct dragon gift. I also want to point out that Baylor, who's one of the first years in Second Squad, has manifested Farsight, and we know Liam had it as well. We know this because in Rhiannon's chapter, she asks Baylor's dragon how many wyvern that he can see.
So at this point, Violet takes note of some other riders in dragons. She notes that Imogen and Dane are defending the airspace above the northern wall, and she also sees Bodhi flying in the area as well, which is surprising to her, and she says, isn't Bodhi supposed to be? Gets cut off and then thinks Xaden's going to be pissed. So this indicates that between Rhee's POV and now, Bodhi has separated from Xaden and is now choosing to fight, presumably against Xaden's wishes, because we know that he's been being trained to take over Tyrrendor should anything happen to Xaden, and this now puts Bodhi at risk in terms of staying alive. I would also guess that around this time is approximately where we pick up with Imogen's POV.
I also want to point out Violet notes, Sigale is nowhere to be seen among the dragons above Drathis, and Violet asks Taryn where they are, and Taryn says she has withdrawn from me. At first, I thought this is when the scene with Berwin begins, but after rereading, I think it happens at the time Violet and Taryn get trapped under the net. I think the net dropping happens simultaneously, so I want to know why at this point Sigale had shut Taryn out and where they are. Because I think the Berwin thing starts a little bit later. It's possible because I know Xaden mentions he gets called to this hidden sun-soaked canyon outside of Drathis. It's possible this is the point where Xaden gets called and they start flying there, and maybe it's like a 20-minute flight or something, like it's not just right there. And so maybe when they start heading in that direction, that's when Sigale blocks Taryn out. But I do have a little bit of a question about the timeline of that.
At this point, Violet and Taryn decide they'll need to take out as many of the 100 or so wyvern as possible, so they command the riot to fall back to airspace above the city so Violet can wield without worry of hitting anyone that she shouldn't. Violet takes a page out of Carr's playbook and decides maybe quantity over quality does have a purpose. She proceeds to release a multitude of lightning strikes, which don't burn her out, but they do overheat her. I also thought it was really cool that many of these strikes are actually collections of several columns of lightning. So she's not just releasing one string of lightning at a time anymore. She's releasing like a whole branch system of them out at the same time, which I think is really cool.
Oh yeah, I feel like we've talked about this, but Violet is really doing an incredible job of really learning control of her signet. I don't think she's like quite fully mastered it because she still needs the conduit, but I think she's got at least like 75% of that down.
Oh, actually, that is something that Rebecca confirmed in the Denver thing. She said, we know about 85% of Violet's first signet.
Oh, okay. Well, so look,
so
I was
another
close.
15% of things. And then I guess while we're on the topic of her signets, then Rebecca also said that we know about 10% of Violet's second signet now.
Ooh, okay.
So there's like a lot of growth for that second one.
And I would imagine that last 15% of the lightning probably has a lot to do with her not having to use a conduit to do it. And a little bit better control
and
all that. I would be shocked if there's some new foundational thing she can do with her lightning. That last 15% is probably more about control and accuracy, if I had to guess. But also, for anyone who hates math, I did it for you. I will admit I'm very bad at it, so it's possible I did it wrong. But by my count, Violet got 34 wyvern, which is impressive. So go, Violet.
Yeah, that's a third of the wyvern that were out there. Nice. After a quick pause for some water, Violet and Taryn decide to go after the Makers and dive straight toward the line of 11 Venin on the ground. 6 Venin take off for the city, 2 fly toward them, and 3, including Theo, fly off into the mountains. Taryn and Violet take off after Theo while simultaneously fending off the two venom that flew at them. Violet takes down one, but the other flees because a tornado pops up in that damn northern field, courtesy of Theo. Cue flashbacks to chapter 10. Obviously, the lesson has been learned to avoid tornadoes at all costs, and Taryn commands the entire riot to ground themselves. Taryn and Violet then continue northeast to follow Theophany, but they also spot Auric and Mulvik flying from the southern valleys back over into where Drathus is. Taryn says the spare brings the advance party from Zelna, 1,000 soldiers and their horses. They landed at the port of Sudra by accident instead of Corden and will be here in less than half an hour. First, this is great news because they do have reinforcements coming if they can hold on long enough and get the wyvern on the ground for infantry to kill, supposedly.
Once again, speaking to logistics, how are the riders going to get the wyvern on the ground for infantry to kill? Like, it seems like if the riders are putting wyvern on the ground, they're already dead. And also, let's say hypothetically you down a wyvern. How exactly is an infantry person going to kill a giant fire-breathing wyvern? You know, I guess with crossbolts, but even then I'm like, I don't think
That's
there's
what I
much
was
an
gonna
infantry
say.
person can do against a wyvern.
I figured it was just going to be crossbolts and then like ruined arrows or something
Maybe,
like
okay.
that. You know what
okay.
they should do? Why haven't they put alloy on arrows or crossbolts? Is that something they already do?
No, this has been a conversation since Iron Flame. Why are we only making alloy daggers? Why are we not making alloy swords, arrowheads? I mean, all kinds of things, right? Why does it have to be a dagger? Yeah, seems kind of odd to me, right?
I don't know. So the other thing in relation to Auric flying in, this explains where Auric was going when he and Mulvik were spotted flying south away from the conflict back in chapter 58. AKA, he was not deserting them. I never doubted him for a second, but now we know where he was. Last, I thought it was interesting that Taryn refers to Auric as the spare, which, I mean, fits literally speaking because he is second in line to Navarre's throne after Halden, but I don't know.
See, I thought I was going to be so clever. So I actually looked up the word spare in English and Gallic, and I got nothing. So I really think it's just the old, got an heir and a spare, and he's just the spare heir to the Navarre.
Yeah.
Which is kind of an insulting nickname.
Right. The spare.
Oh, like, here comes Lorraine, the spare. Like, wow, okay.
Karen's so rude, though, because he does this with everyone. He's like, spare, the dark one.
The dark one.
Yes, yeah.
Well, you know what? He was right, though. Xaden is the dark one.
So anyways, before the chapter ends, there are a couple notable details. Violet wonders where Xaden and Sigale are, and when she reaches for the bond, she finds a wall of black ice. This is definitely indicative of Xaden being on his own now, and perhaps he's on his way to find Berwyn, but we also know that Sigale hasn't been netted yet because we know that happens in chapter 64. We also see that Cure launches into the air and disappears into the fray above the city. Then Glane launches in pursuit shortly after. So this is basically close to the timeline where we pick up with Imogen's POV next, because she goes and chases Bodhi down, even though the riot is all supposed to be grounded right now. Last but not least, Taryn reminds Violet one objective, decide our fate, and it's decided that they have to follow their original plan and kill Theophany. Once again, the whole conversation of paths and choosing comes into play once more, and this does bring to mind what the priestess in Umbriel was referring to when she said Violet's future wasn't certain and she has another path. Was she strictly talking about the gods and dedication, or was this, actually about turning venom? Regardless, this is definitely another version of choosing. Violet has to follow this one goal and path, or everyone else will fall to the venom. But that path, unfortunately, compromises Xaden and all the other aftermath effects of these events, so I also found Violet's word choice about Imogen kind of interesting. She thinks she'll rip the sky apart before she and Glane accept defeat. And I was like, rip the sky apart? What could that mean? I mean, obviously it could just be figurative, but is this also kind of like alluding to Imogen's strength of power and how we see that she does have a second Signet? So that ends chapter 62, moving on to chapter 63. The excerpt. This is redacted accounting of Drusilla Cardulo's last words, and she states, "Fuck you. My daughter and I will meet Malik with clean consciences. Will you and your daughters be able to say the same when they come for you?" First of all, from the context of the excerpt and the chapter, we know Drusilla is Imogen's mother, and she was likely killed in the Caldear executions post-rebellion. Drusilla's words were likely directed at Lilith, and I would assume "they come for you" is referring to the Venom.
Not only that, she says, "Will you and your daughters be able to say the same?" which strongly implies she's referring to Lilith and her two daughters because we know she has two of them, Violet and Mira.
Overall, I found this really sad, and I empathize with Imogen and all of the rebellion children who lost parents and loved ones in the rebellion or as punishment from Navarre.
And fourth thing, I remember thinking that it was really tragic. But once you learn the truth about the Venom and Navarre's treachery, it becomes devastating. I cannot believe the marked ones didn't burn down Basgiath immediately. This is me. I'd be like, you're all dead. The moment I get power, you're gonna meet Malik.
Yep.
And so the fact that they were able to show some restraint is really impressive.
In a way, the children were the ones to break the cycle of hate and consequences of Navarre's secret and lies about the Venom. We've seen Violet and Xaden in love, and we've seen Violet move to support Tyrandor's cause and ultimately befriend many of the Marked Ones, who in turn accept her as well. Imogen and Violet in particular have developed a friendship with time. It kind of started off as Imogen being ordered to train and help Violet, but by this point, I think they are friends, so...
I agree. I didn't really think about that, but that's really true. Violet is kind of like the bridge between the Marked Ones and the Navarrian writers. I also thought this excerpt was interesting because I actually didn't know that Imogen had an older sister that died during the rebellion. And I think this is also foreshadowing for what she tells Quinn as she dies, that her sister and mom will be waiting for her.
Oh.
But yeah, I didn't know that Imogen lost a sister. If that was mentioned, that's just like such a small detail I totally missed. But that makes it even sadder. She didn't just lose her mom, but also her older sister.
To get into the events of this chapter, we pick up with Imogen and Glaine en route to help Bodhi and Kira, who are currently facing several wyvern. I think it's important to note that Imogen also points out her distress over the thought of anything happening to Bodhi. She thinks if we lose both him and Ryerson, Tyrandor falls to whomever the king appoints. I'd rather die than see a Navarrian aristocrat on the burned throne Mom and Katrina died defending. I think this continues to play into the tension we've seen between Bodhi and Xaden over Bodhi's personal desire to simply be a writer and his potential as the future heir of Tyrandor. The fact that Bodhi is out there fighting and putting himself in danger definitely plays into the potential foreshadowing for him being the new brother at the end.
I think it's also important to note the importance of Bodhi to Tyrandor. Imogen herself is noting this, and we've really only seen that narrative from Xaden, but it seems like Bodhi gets the pressure put on him from basically everyone, which I think plays an important role in his character, and more importantly, his decision-making, which could or could not have implications for him being the new brother.
Aside from this, it also shows how badly the children of Tyrandor want Tyrandor to keep its power now that it's been restored. They still hate Navarre for everything they've lied about, and they understandably hate Navarre for killing their parents and taking Tyrandor's independence away. Imogen is determined to keep Bodhi alive, and while they fly to help, she also wonders where Xaden is, noting he'd better be helping in the northeastern tower because I haven't seen a trace of Shadow in the last 20 minutes. Big yikes, because Xaden is not by that tower.
You can say that again. To me, this aligns with the timeline of when Taryn notes that Sigil has blocked him out, and Violet tries to reach for Xaden, but his shields are impenetrable. I think whatever happened with Berwin began the moment Sigil left Xaden to rescue Violet and continued to play out until we see what happens at the end.
Glaine relays a report from Kruth, Quinn's dragon, that says the 2 cases of alloyed weapons brought is not sufficient for what they need, and that Felix's dragon, Nurlock, informed them they've sent for more using Garrick to distance wield between Drathis and presumably Eratia. This means Felix knows about Garrick's second signet, and we know everyone who has a second signet has kept that tightly under wraps. But I guess it seems like they've really only told those that are closest to Xaden. They don't necessarily trust the assembly to know about them either, unless absolutely necessary, which is interesting.
I agree. I think in an ideal world, they would all want to keep their second signets a secret basically forever. But in a situation like this where revealing you can do something that could quite literally turn the tide of a battle and even the war, you got to do it. I can't say for sure they would have told Felix if they didn't desperately need to get more daggers ASAP. That just so happened to be 4 hours away. But I don't know, because Felix is also part of the assembly. But I think in an ideal world, yeah, nobody would tell anybody for second signets. This also helps establish another timeline for Garrick. I think it's safe to say that Garrick takes Jack back to Basgiath, then either takes the Ribosed chest back to Corden or maybe back to Horatia. I know we talked about that in the last episode. Did he steal it from Dakaris? Did they negotiate it? But either way, I don't think he leaves the Ribosed chest at Basgiath, so he takes it somewhere. He then comes back to Dreythus, and then basically they send him back immediately to get more daggers. So I think that kind of helps establish our Garrick timeline.
In regards to the amount of weapons they have, this is surprising considering Tyrandor, quote, has been withholding their forges weapons from Navarre and theoretically should have enough of them. We learn later that they were working on weaving wards around Dreythus, so I think this helps to demonstrate just how many alloyed daggers it takes to power wards. We don't know how many daggers a case holds, but if 2 cases is enough to start a war within their kingdom, I would assume it's a lot. And yet, that is not enough for what they need.
I'm a little surprised that 2 isn't enough because back in chapter 44, when they're breaking down the fall of Suniva in Battle Brief, Violet thinks there are maybe 2 crates kept at each outpost. It seems like based on this and what Imogen thinks, 2 crates is quite a lot of daggers. So I'm actually a little surprised that isn't enough to weave the wards.
I guess we also have to consider the fact that alloy weapons are presumably being split between use for the wards that they are going to create, as well as arming riders and infantry to fight the venom. So maybe they were needing to divvy them up. And so that kind of played into why it wasn't enough, but I don't know.
That's totally fair. I didn't even think about that, but you're right. They do need to arm everyone, otherwise they can't kill the venom. So you guys can probably tell at this point that I think Bodhi is the new brother. So I'm going to point out every little detail that points to that, okay? I was trying to slow roll and keep it kind of a secret till the end. Ooh, what does Addison really think? But one thing I forgot about myself is I am not subtle. I'm not subtle in the slightest. Not even a little bit. It's described, Glaine's head snaps upward. Cure suffer, she warns, in that gnawing tone. Cure could be suffering from being attacked by wyvern, or it could be because Cure is in physical agony over Bodhi channeling from the earth. So just had to point that out.
I agree that I feel pretty sure that Bodhi is the new brother as well. I feel like at this time, though, they're flying, right? So I guess if he did channel, it would have been before they launched.
True.
Or potentially after.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Maybe he's thinking about it and Cure is roaring away. No,
and that pains Cure because he's thinking about it. So Glane warns Imogen to brace for a change in flight tactic to get to Cure faster, and Imogen also knows that she sees Kath and Dane launch into the air to take down 2 wyvern who cross into their airspace. I smirked to myself when Imogen thinks, guess Atos is all about breaking rules now. But on a more serious note, they were supposed to stay grounded because of the tornado, but Dane and Kath decided they weren't going to let the wyvern skate on through. And I was like, hell yeah, Daddy Dane.
Oh, he's breaking all the rules. And I think he'll break a few more for Sloane, if you know what I'm saying. I am manifesting that ship so hard. I need it to happen.
If we already thought that steep climbs and rolling would be hard enough to stay on, then I was shook that Imogen is holding on upside down without a saddle, like Spider-Man style, while Glane goes and attacks the wyvern from underneath it. I give so much props to Imogen and her strength for that, because I would never be able to do that. So I also love that Imogen and Glane argue about how many wyvern they've taken down. It feels very fitting for their personalities. So
I would agree. Don't get me wrong, I like Theurge, but the little bit we see of their relationship didn't give me the same feeling that this one did. And I feel like Glane and Imogen, they just make sense. Immediately reading this, I'm like, yes, they belong together, just like Atrim and Riddick.
They make it to Cure, who is holding out, but has a deep cut across his chest from wyvern claws. And that's probably why he was also in pain.
Okay, maybe. Maybe.
I gotta say, I definitely understand the whole, like, orange dragons are unpredictable because Glade really does not give, like, any warning before she changes her flight decisions or, like, does anything.
Once again, I forgot everything I knew about every other color of dragon, so thank you for remembering that and weaving that back into the world building, because basically, if you aren't Indarn or Terran, I don't know anything about you and how you roll, so...
Every scene we get of the Riders and the Dragons taking on the wyvern is really cool, and this one was no exception. Ghislaine is body slamming wyvern, and Imogen is like simultaneously running down her back and like stabbing at different wyvern in the eyes, and I was like, just so epic. At this point, Kath also joins them, having taken out the wyvern in their airspace for now. It's also noted that Cure now has a hole in his wing, so Bibby is not doing so hot, but he is okay at least. We also get some info about battle strategy. Kaori and the other officers apparently hold the eastern, southern, and western territory where the battle is picking up, but they are down their best rider, aka Garrick, because we know he was sent to get more weapons in Aracia.
I also thought it was funny that after Imogen thinks about Garrick, Ghislaine says, "For someone so decisive, you have yet to act on that," gets cut off. And Imogen is like, "Nope, shut it." As funny as this was, I'm like, maybe when you guys are quite literally fighting for your lives, this isn't the best time to talk about that. I don't know. Your lives are quite literally at stake. Drathos might fall, but Glaine's like, you need to get on that. You need to tell him about your feelings. But
She should. We didn't get any progress on that.
I know, but I do think in book 4, based on how this set of chapters go, we will start to see something blossoming between them. I think Quinn's death is going to kind of foundationally change Imogen, and she'll be like, you know what, Quinn is right. I don't have time to waste. I need to tell him how I feel. I don't think it'll be like this big romantic gesture, but I do think we'll start to see that play out in book 4.
We shift into the next big scene of this chapter when Imogen sees dark wielders in various colored robes, some holding staffs, landing on the spiral tower and the city walls. Most notably, 2 head straight toward the turret where Quinn is inside working. Imogen demands to go help, which Ghislaine is not happy about, but she does not object to. And Imogen notes they were supposed to be safe. No one was supposed to know, but the purposeful strides of those dark wielders proves they know what's happening in that tower. And I was like, fucking rat pan check. It's him.
What's so funny? Even though I was the one who was like, it's Panchek, he's the traitor, I didn't even make that connection. It did not even occur to me. You're totally right. I mean, I feel like it's basically canon that they know what Quinn's doing right now because of Panchek. And fucking Panchek, that rat.
I have so much respect for Imogen for immediately going after the Dark Wielder without hesitation, and also Dane, who catches up to her as well. And we get the big reveal scene.
Oh my God.
I was excited to see that Imogen has a second Signet. But anyways, the Dark Wielder fucking senses them, which I was like, eye roll. Because they always just know for some reason, so I'm kind of over it. But then he blasts fire at them with the swing of his staff. Another side note. So is the staff basically like a wand, like for the venom, Or how is the venom? Because he swings it at them and then the fire just erupts. And I'm like, well, it sounds like a fucking wand if you ask me.
No, it does. It does. It's just something about venom having wands seems really funny to me. I don't know why. A little Avada Kedavra. Jeez. No, you're not doing it right. You have to be like, Avada Kedavra. Like, you have to say it.
Yes.
That's a good question. I need to think about this a little bit more. I think my assumption at this moment is the sage venom at Resin was actually Berwyn, but we know whoever that venom was also had a staff. So it seems like they do have them, but they don't always have them. So I'm not sure what their purpose is, but I would assume it's used for something magical. Maybe it concentrates the magic or something. I don't know, but it does seem like he's using it to conjure the fire in this moment.
Yeah, would love some answers about that, but we didn't get them. So anyways, Imogen grabs the shield from Dane, and then she turns the shield into stone, which shields them from the fire. And to finish this epic sequence, Dane then gets a kill shot with an alloy dagger, and the venom desiccates in front of them. Woo! So,
oh my God. Okay.
I am assuming this shield was made of some sort of like metal or maybe a dragon scale, but Imogen turns it into stone. And this is a callback to chapter 7 when Sawyer tells Violet, I can't think of a single rock or earth wielder in our history, when they are trying to recruit him to help with their little wardstone shenanigans. And at that time, Addison pointed out in our second episode that this had to be foreshadowing and that we probably are going to see someone get the signet. And turns out that person is Imogen.
Ayo.
Also, we still feel pretty confident we are going to be getting a new manifestation of the 6 powerful signets. Whether we are going to get all of the same signets of the first 6, unsure, but we are definitely going to get a collection of really strong ultra rare signets. And I would imagine that an earth wielder counts as one, since as far as anyone knows, there's never been one in Navarre's history.
We will definitely be talking a lot more about this in our theories episode for sure. I've got some thoughts, I've got some theories, I've got some speculations about this. In my opinion, I feel like we've already seen 4 of the 6 reincarnated, or however you want to say it. So we'll talk about it then. But let me just say, God damn, it feels good to get this right. I freaking knew that was going to come back up again somehow. This also begs the question of what all can Imogen do with this signet? Has she used it in other books and we totally missed it? What is she capable of? What are the limitations? There's just a lot I'd really, really like to know about it. I'm curious to see how it can be creatively used in future conflicts, battles, etc. I'm also curious who all knows about it. It doesn't really seem like, I don't know, I go back and forth and like, do all the marked ones know about each other's second signet, or I don't know. So lots of questions about that. This is also a bit far-fetched, but I alluded to this earlier in the episode. I'm wondering if with this signet, will Imogen be able to repurpose the magic in the ground to create protective barriers for the riders when they have to fight Venom, if they have to dismount? We know that whole conversation with Theophanie about, does it have to be drained or repurposed? Her word is repurposed. It opens the door for that. There's a lot of possibilities. So as always, this was just introduced. We have so many questions. We did not get any answers, but I'm really excited to see how this develops in book 4.
Yes, totally agree. While we're on the topic of second signets, though, I think this is a good time to add some new insight that we've learned about how second signets develop based on what Rebecca Yarros confirmed during her Denver tour stop. So up until now, I was under the impression that the second signets with the marked ones were because of their rebellion relics. Back in chapter 12, Violet had asked Xaden, how often do second signets accompany these particular relics? And Xaden responded, often enough to be sure Kaori can't possibly have accurate records, but not too completely that anyone questions why I only present with one. So then, during the tour, when Rebecca was asked, can you give us some insight into how Kaori's records for dragons and rider bonds are incorrect? Rebecca responds, what makes you think members of the Empyrean always give their correct name to the rider? Or what makes you think the riders aren't aware that it's a different name? It's the rider that says the name, not the dragon. And something about that, I shit you not, I king prawned myself into space because I was like, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? But I mean, with that information, I don't know, it continues to muddle this question, right? Because I guess her answer, it's not confirming, I guess, anything about second signet, but the implications, I think, do tie it into second signets and how they manifest. But as far as this direct answer goes, this basically means either the dragon lies about its name to the rider, or the rider lies about a dragon's name for record for whatever reason. So, I mean, who knows how many dragons or riders have lied about their names, and how many dragons we actually have who are currently bonded to riders who come from a direct family line they have bonded in before. So then, when you think about dragons potentially bonding directly in the family line, then that's where you start getting in this like implication that the second signets are not necessarily tied to the rebellion relics, and that possibly any rider who's dragon bonded directly in the family line could potentially develop a second signet. And I guess just like as a side note, we were given that information back in Iron Flame. I don't really know what I was doing with that information, but I just kind of like cataloged it, but it kind of left my brain. So I'm a little bit facepalming myself because I was like, well, I guess they did tell us that, But then I just really honed in on the rebellion relic thing. I don't know. I guess generally speaking, I'm just kind of confused now about what it really is.
I totally hear what you're saying, and I absolutely agree. It is likely that it will be revealed that one of our writers actually purposely bonded in the familial line. However, I'm not ready to totally discredit the idea that the relics play some role in the writers manifesting second signets. When we think about how many people have second signets, it's starting to add up to quite a few, right? And there's also the possibility of more that we don't know. We're going to get another batch of first years next year who some of them will be marked ones. And so if we take the thought of, oh, it has nothing to do with the relics, then you're starting to bleed into this like much larger conspiracy about the Empyrean, that they're purposely bonding generational family members to develop second signets. And I feel like that muddies the waters too much and it gets a little confusing. Honestly, in my opinion, it is not above Rebecca Yarros to say something exciting like that to throw us off her scent, to throw us off our game, right? Like, I'm not saying she's lying, but I'm saying maybe she's not being true. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could totally see that. Like, oh, that's totally what she means. Or like, oh, she's like, I didn't say that's what was happening. I just said, like, you're just making an assumption. It's kind of playing some mind games with us, right? All that is to say, it would not shock me if we find out, perhaps Imogen specifically, like her dragon had actually bonded her great-great-grandmother or something. But I'm not ready to discount the relics because I don't feel confident enough in our knowledge of runes, and specifically the rune that Colonel Mari wove that gave the marked ones their relic, to say that it doesn't give them second signets, because we already know for sure that that relic helps protect them from Melgren's signet. So it's pretty clear that rune was extremely special and had a lot of magical implications. So I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes. I'm saying I need more info, which I guess is like what we've been saying for 3 months. So
yeah.
But I think it's an interesting thought, and I'm glad you brought it up because it is important, right? I mean, she said it and she's the author of the book. So I don't know.
Yeah, I guess for me, why say that unless you're supposed to kind of
dwell on that,
or it's supposed to change your understanding of something that you previously didn't know or hadn't considered, I guess. So
true.
I guess at this point, they're still both on the table until it's like officially confirmed in the book. To continue down the line of maybe it is just bonding in the direct familial line that produces second signets. Back in chapter 55 of Iron Flame, when Violet figures out Xaden has a second signet, she says, "You told me Sigale was bonded to your grandfather, which makes you a direct descendant. If a dragon bonds a family member, it can strengthen a signet, but a direct descendant will either produce a second signet or madness. And you seem pretty sane to me. I just can't figure out why Sigale was allowed to choose you, how she got away with it, how you both did." So that quote specifically does tie in pretty well, I would say, to like what Rebecca said.
Agreed.
This is how they got away with it. Either Sigale lied about her name or Xaden lied about Sigale's name. But to continue, later in chapter 58 of Iron Flame, Xaden tells Violet his intrinsic signet manifested about a month after the shadows did. And at the time, Professor Carr approached him to ask if he had any other strange abilities because they knew Sigale bonded with one of his relatives. Xaden lied to Carr, and since his shadow signet was extra strong, they figured he only had one signet. The writer of record was also thought to have been his great uncle instead of his grandfather, which gave the impression that Sigale had just bonded with a family member, but not necessarily a direct descendant. So, based off of that context, a big question is, how did Navarre get the wrong record for Sigale's previous writer? The only way I can make sense of this is if Xaden's grandpa lied and gave the name of Xaden's great uncle when he entered the quadrant. And I say that because, first of all, like a great uncle is the uncle of one of your parents, and that makes sense age range wise for Xaden's grandpa's age. I also don't think that a dragon like Sigale could get away with lying because she's a blue, and blue dragons in general just kind of seem to be a little less common, at least from the total number of dragons that we've met so far. She's also mated to Tairn, who is a very well-known battle dragon. And in general, Sigale is known to be a really ruthless and revered battle dragon as well. So I think in Sigale's specific instance, it would be hard for her to get away with lying about her name, which is why then I concluded, okay, well, it must have been Xaden's grandpa lying about his name. so that the association of who Sigale's previous rider was couldn't be tracked well. So that's my thinking for that.
I need to sit with that more. Your logic is sound to me just in this moment. I almost need I need a Ryerson family tree. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's Sigale and Xaden's situation is specifically what Rebecca was referring to. But then to your point, something I didn't think about is how more distinct dragons would make it harder to lie about who they are and or who they bonded. And I think that definitely makes sense, as you said, for basically any blue or black dragon. I think the most rare is black, but it's pretty heavily implied there are not that many blue dragons. But the other 4 colors seem pretty common. But on the other hand, you also have to remember dragons can bond a rider and then go years and years before they bond another. And there is so many dragons that it would be possible for Navarrian riders to just not recognize or see and kind of forget what they look like. Not to mention they grow during that time, right? So you could bond a rider, your rider dies, and you're like, I'm out for the next 10 years, until I feel ready or whatever. So I think I'm going to catalog that, file that away. But I also kind of think Rebecca Yarros is a chaos queen. And I kind of think she's like, what if I just subtly hinted this one small thing? I make it seem like it's bigger than it is so that everyone spirals. You know what I mean? So I definitely think it's something worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's part of one of those things that we've kind of talked about sometimes where it's some clarity about what's actually true and what's not would be nice, because there's so much back and forth where I'm like, okay, well, what's the point? What's the point of having some of this information revealed only to turn around and say something else that spirals you off in another way? There's too much room to be well, it actually was that, even though, you know what I mean? I don't know.
There's too much mistrust.
Yes, I want a clear, direct answer based on some of this, okay? I don't need answers for every single little thing, but I would like some true, confirmed, this is the answer, no speculation, confirmation.
Yeah, it would be nice to have a solid foundation of world building on this is how the world works. These are the facts. I feel like if we could have our feet firmly planted in that part of the world building, it would make the rest of the book more enjoyable, because you're almost what a waste of time for me to read all this because I don't know if all of this is bullshit. You know what I mean? It's I don't know.
What's the point of remembering all this information or tracking clues so closely only for half of that to be a red herring or whatever it is? So I don't know.
Exactly.
So to kind of address the other implication about it's clear that a lot of marked ones specifically have second signets, like Garrick and Imogen, for example, and Liam did as well. If we are taking what Rebecca is saying as truth, then that would mean that their dragons, Crod and Glain, must have bonded in the direct family line. But also, who's to say that Crod or Glain's names are the correct names anyway, right? So again, just too many questions. But this also connects back to chapter 12 when Xaden says, our dragons came looking for us. They knew what they were doing. And then Violet asks, giving you a better chance of survival? And Xaden responds, more like building their own army. More signets equal more power. So a lot of these thoughts were based off of Rebecca telling the truth. That's where it led me down this thought pattern. I'm not necessarily super gung-ho, yes, this is correct, but this is just what I was thinking about in the moment.
Okay,
so
take it with a grain of salt.
So it seems like this has been very calculated on the part of the dragons. We do know there is much more to the Empyrean that we have yet to learn, but this new information implies to me that there could be a group of dragons who are intentionally selecting for riders who share family ties to past riders. They intentionally want stronger or more signets produced per individual rider. In particular, most of the riders, aside from Violet that we know of, who have second signets are marked ones. So then I wonder if this is because the dragons already know that the marked ones share an ideology that is willing to fight for what's right, so they purposely look for them. Or maybe this leads back to something about Tyrandor in particular being important. Maybe the dragons also anticipated that Tyrandor would at some point become sovereign again, and thus they knew they would need their own group of dragons to protect it. So then they started over time, selecting for those riders. I don't know. This also leads you to then ask why a group of dragons would want to build a separate army in the first place. My best guess at this time is that it would have to do with the venom We know Navarre has historically been hiding the venom until recently, but the problem has not gone away. I kind of feel like the dragons probably knew at some point they could no longer just wait behind the wards, and they knew they would have to make some kind of different move. So maybe this separate group of dragons started taking matters into their own hands. It would also kind of explain why Kaori made that comment about wanting to see how this Empyrean functions, referring to the dragons in Eratia when he came with them like 5-10 chapters ago or whatever it was. So, just food for thought.
That was a lot of food. That was a big meal he just served us.
Okay, so to continue with the rest of the events, Dane is just learning about everyone's secrets today, which I think is kind of funny.
Of all people, Dane.
Signet, Imogen, Signet, yes, yeah. But he goes after a separate dark wielder, and at this point, Imogen follows the one that went into the turret.
Poor Dane has just got to be like, what the actual fuck is going on? Garrick's over here disappearing into thin air. Imogen took a fucking shield and turned it into a rock. And also she saved me from being burned to death. Like, of all people, for Imogen to save Dane, Dane has got to be questioning his sanity right now. He was like, I don't know what the fuck this is going on. Like, is this some venom poison dream? Because it's crazy.
So Imogen meets two women with children stumbling out that she directs to head west. Definitely hold on to that for later, because this next part just... it broke my heart. So down on the third story of the turret, Quinn is astral projecting 3 versions of herself, which confuses this purple-robed venom that's down there. And this did give me some momentary relief for Imogen and myself, because I thought, oh, brilliant strategy. Good to go. It's gonna work. Not the case. The real Quinn is in fact nearby, creeping up the stairs. Imogen throws an alloy dagger just as the real Quinn lunges with hers as well. The dagger hits, the venom goes down, but so does Quinn.
Quinn!
That freaking venom landed a lethal stab to Quinn's ribs, leaving us with another tragic death scene.
I just knew we weren't done with the tragedy. Traeger's death did not hurt enough, and I should have known better. Because, like, sorry, not to, like, dunk on my boy Traeger, but, like, did we really care about Traeger? Were we super invested in him? Yeah, you know, I was like, oh, this is sad for Kat. Thank you, next. But Quinn, and seeing how it affected Imogen, just, no.
I know. We very quickly learn that Quinn was the one that protected the 2 women, and Imogen does reassure her that they made it out. This entire scene, I had tears come in, especially when Quinn starts telling Imogen, to tell Jax that she loves her. And then she tells Kruth, you became my life. And then to Imogen, she says, tell my parents it was worth it. I'm glad it's you with me. Parapet to Malik's doorstep. I'm so sorry I have to go first this time. And then,
my God, stop. You're killing me.
Tell him, Jen. And you find some happy. You're mine and I love you too. And I was like, Malik, make it stop.
You're like, end it. Put us out of our misery. When this scene started, I knew. I was like, here we go. Something bad's going to happen. And I felt like the tiny prick of tears start behind my eyes. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to take some deep breaths and I can hold it together. And I literally only got to the part where she said, this is one thing you can't fix, Jen. And I was like, no. It was just something about the intimacy of Quinn calling Imogen a nickname that just broke me. Because to be honest, can you imagine Imogen letting anyone call her any kind of nickname? Absolutely not, right? It's because Quinn is so special. And the scene continues, and like the absolute death blow for me, where I like full on started ugly crying, is when Quinn says she's scared and Imogen promises that her mom and sister will take care of her. And I wrote, damn it, I'm crying right now. Reading this. That was sad. The part that got me when she's like, I'm scared. I'm like, oh my God. And then real quick, I'm pretty sure you and I are on the same page about this, but when she says, and you should tell him, Jen, tell him and you find some happy. Quinn is definitely telling Imogen to tell Garrick how she feels, right? I think that's pretty obvious, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
I thought so. I just had to make sure because, leave no stone unturned, every possible path.
Yeah, I think it was definitely about Garrick too. But anyways, to continue, Imogen goes on to recall conscription day when she first met Quinn.
Oh my gosh, this was even worse. Like, You already did me so dirty with that. I'm scared. And then when we got to, we made it a good one, I was literally like, why, Rebecca? Why? Honestly, for me, we made it a good one has surpassed It's Been My Honor. This was harder for me.
Oh. So with that, Quinn, we commend your soul to Malik. She passes on. But as Imogen is sitting there holding Quinn, the color starts to slowly fade from the walls, and Garrick then comes shouting up the stairs. It turns out that there are 6 dark wielders draining the city walls, and they got a GTFO. Rebecca knows exactly what she was doing to us. She's playing with our hearts and our minds, because I, first of all, swooned when Garrick tells Imogen, I'm not leaving you, and then he leans in and slides his hand behind her neck. But then she also hits us with that description of the unusual pallor of his complexion, which Imogen just attributes to his exhaustion. I bring that up because just to lightly touch on the new brother thing, I don't think Garrick is the brother, but with descriptions like this and, you know, him being exhausted and walking to different places, having to do a lot, but reaching his limit, I can sort of see why there's a lot of people that do, just to be kind of
fair and balanced.
Yes.
We'll consider it, and we'll consider how wrong you are, but we will consider it.
Also, we cannot ignore that Garrick picks up both Imogen and Quinn to distance wield them out of the building. Because, like, A, how big is this man? And B, how strong is this man?
Lorraine asking the hard-hitting questions, asking the real questions on this podcast. How big is this man? Hey, he's single,
Real.
Lorraine. You can go for it.
But I'm not single, so I can't.
Oh, damn, I forgot about that. You're right.
I forgot about
that thought just totally left my mind. You know, listen, when I read these books, I'm single, and all of these shadow daddies are open to me. In the fantasy world, I'm single, okay? Also, I wouldn't want to fight Imogen for Garrick, so you can have him, girl.
That's a no for me, dog. Anyways. They're taken to a new location. In this building, Trissa and Felix are present as well. And this is when we learn Trissa is presumably weaving new extensions of the wards because Garrick says, are you weaving? And she responds, we're starting. They'll be weak until we can bolster with more power, but they're our best shot. So basically, they're trying to create a new outpost in Drathis by weaving extensions of the wards. However, the farther away the wards get stretched from the wardstone that they originate from, the more power you need to keep them working. Thus why they probably needed so much alloy and more alloy daggers than they thought. We also see that Garrick has reached his limit at this point and is both discouraged and exhausted by the idea that they may not have enough alloy weapons and he can't get more without burning himself out. Imogen follows Garrick outside, where we see Bodhi on his hands and knees retching, supposedly. Suspicious, possibly. We're going to talk about the brother in a couple chapters here, but you know, definitely keep this in mind. This is also the last time that we hear of someone seeing Bodhi.
Well, you mean until Xaden sees him in the last chapter, of course, with Berwin.
Presumably, yes. Yeah.
Believe it or not, I actually Googled this for science. But there is a difference between vomiting and retching, and I think the word retching is purposely used to mislead. I'm so serious about this. Listen,
when
words matter.
This, I was like, what?
I know, okay, but listen. I think we're supposed to think of Bodhi as vomiting, but vomiting is when you actually expel the contents of your stomach. Retching is an attempt to vomit, but nothing comes out. Very similar to convulsing. And I think that distinction is important because I don't know what it looks like when you turn Zen in, but I bet it looks a lot like retching. I bet it looks like there's like, you got your hand on the ground, you're bracing yourself, and you're kind of, the power's surging through your body. I'm just saying.
See, I always imagined it like getting electrocuted. Not that I know what that feels like.
Yeah, like this sensation
like
runs over your
if you were to
body.
touch something and you just, like how cartoons display it, where you just like touch it and you're like, you
power up.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
So, to continue, Garrick also starts walking away, and when Imogen asks where he's going, he says since he can't distance wield anymore for the time being because of his exhaustion, he says, I'd better find some fucking way to do something. To be fair, I do think it's important to note that this is the last time we or someone else sees Garrick. But I would like to acknowledge that Garrick is aware he's reached his limit for the time being power-wise. So, to close out Imogen's chapter, she has Ghislaine send out a message to get every rider within the walls to bring their daggers, because this is the only chance they have to get enough power collected to ensure the new ward extensions can work properly. And that ends chapter 63. Moving on to chapter 64. This was a big one, folks. The excerpt. This is the message that was written to Auric from High Priestess Desiree to His Royal Highness Auric Greatcastle, Prince, I forgot how to say this, Camlin?
Camlin, yeah.
Camelot Camlin. Prince Camlin of Navarre, when the carved marble dagger was given to him, which he then passed off to Violet. The message states, a gift from one servant of Dunne to another, I must warn you, only those touched by the gods should wield their wrath. I will pray to her that she need not use it to avoid reacquainting herself with the other who curries her favor. Her path is still not set.
Woo! So before I let Lorraine off her leash, I just have this super important note here. I knew Aric's first name was Cam, but I didn't know it was short for Camlin. And what kind of name is that? And the spelling is wild to me, guys. It's Camlaen. And you know what? As Lorraine said, in my mind, I'm going to refer to him as Camelot Camlin.
Or Chameleon Camlin, because it kind of looks like it could go chameleon as well.
Yeah. I feel that, yeah. All I know
a couple letters there
is that he clearly was the least favorite child of Tauri and whoever his wife was, because that name is terrible.
But also, what kind of name is Tari? Like,
that's true.
Tari.
Tari.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, how does the priestess know Aric's true identity? I'm getting conspiratorial here with this question. Is this part of the gifts or the powers that priestesses receive for their service? Just knowing truths and things about people? Or is it possible Auric has some unique connection to Dunne as well? Because the priestess does refer to him as a fellow servant of Dunne.
As fun as these thoughts are, I just have to point out the very real possibility he just told her who he really was. That's also very possible, Lorraine.
He was just like, hi, I'm Prince Camelot Cam, and I'm here to work for Dunne.
Well, I feel like if he can trust anyone with his true identity, it would be a high priestess.
Possibly.
I don't know.
Not Theophanie, though.
Well, that's because she shunned Dunne.
True. But anyways, to get back to the servant of Dunne thing. So being a servant of Dunne or the gods could just be generic terminology for someone who is, working on behalf of Dunne, like a soldier, could be a priestess, could be a temple attendant, just anybody in general associated with it. But we already know a high priestess has fully dedicated and committed her life to serving Dunne. So for her to call Auric a servant implies to me that he could be somehow connected to Dunne as well. I don't think he's necessarily dedicated, but there does, to me, seem to be a distinction between being a servant of the gods versus being touched by a god like Violet is. I think to be touched by the gods signals that Violet specifically has been marked or noticed by a god, and it basically introduces the chosen one trope. We know she was partially dedicated, but this wasn't completed because her path is not set. But you have apparently two gods who got their eyes on Violet. So before I move forward with the next point, I have a filled-in version that clarifies what I think the interpretation is supposed to be of this note. So, a gift from one servant of Dunne to another. I must warn you, only those touched by the gods should wield their power. I will pray to Dunne that Violet need not use it to avoid reacquainting herself with the other god who curries Violet's favor. Her path is still not set. That's like how I would fill it in to make it a little more clear. So this is also where I wondered if the whole path being set was not necessarily about turning venom. Maybe it was about choosing a god to serve. But if we remember the line from the priestess who told Mira, they only accepted children whose futures are certain, and Violet still had paths to choose from. The priestess said if Violet chose her future poorly, she could still earn their mentorship, but she'd turn gets cut off. And then the conversation continues, and she says, in one of those paths, she said, the heart that beats for you or within you would do the wrong thing for the right reason. Reach for unspeakable power and turn dark. I think combined with what Theophanie says later, it really changes the meaning of what this all meant, because maybe it implies that you can still be dedicated as a venin. I have more thoughts when we get to what Theo says. But to continue down this line of thinking, I started wondering if turning venin actually means that you become a servant or you dedicate yourself to Malik. I kind of started going down that path back in our chapters hovering Unreal, but there wasn't enough information or evidence, so I don't feel like my thoughts were very well thought out. But then I Googled, are venin servants of Malik? Just because I was curious to see if anybody else had any of these thoughts. And because we can now, since we have finished the book. So I found a fantastic Reddit thread post relating to everything that I felt like I was kind of picking up on, but I couldn't coherently put it all together. So I'm not going to read the entire post. We'll just link it in the episode description and you can go read it for yourself. I'm just going to give a cliff notes. Here's what they think. And I have some other thoughts about it.
Yeah. So guys, I had not come across this thread yet in my research, but oh my God. As Lorraine said, we will definitely be linking this Reddit post in our show notes. And shout out to the user who posted it, Emmy Ego. You have to go and read this. It is phenomenal. It's incredibly well thought out. And more importantly, it's formatted so well. It's very palatable and easy to read. Yes. The points are clear and concise. They're evidence-based. I mean, it's good. I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you who have already finished the book already came across this because it was a very popular post on Reddit. We, of course, just couldn't read that until the book was done, but it is insanely good. So you guys definitely have to go check it out.
Yes. So cliff notes for this theory. Emmy Ego presents, to turn venin is to dedicate yourself to Malik. She looks at a few different things and she poses the question of how could this be? But within the series, turning venin is equated to losing one's soul. And this is repeated throughout all 3 books to exemplify this. There's a few references to venin individuals, and some of the things that we have also pointed out where there's phrases like, his soul is no longer his own, soulless venin. Maybe you see it as a loss of your soul. This person basically implies, who is the god of death? Well, it's Malik. And Malik is the god who also is known to collect souls. And so basically dedicating yourself to Malik is to offer up your soul to him for your soul to die, basically, in exchange for power. And I mean, put simply, that kind of seems like what the venin do. So definitely take some time to go look at all of the evidence that this person has put together because it's massive and it's deep. Okay, so fair warning. Okay, what?
That was a consider for it. That's what she said joke.
Oh! God, wait, yeah. You're so right.
He said it's massive and deep. No, I forgot what I was going to say. Whoops.
So while I really, really love the whole thread post and the whole conclusion because it perfectly sums up everything that I've kind of felt as well, my only sort of hang up with it is that I don't necessarily feel that Malik is bad. I don't really feel like any of the gods are bad or good per se. They just kind of are. Malik may take the souls as a death god, but ultimately the venin still live. So could you consider that, cheating Malik? And would Malik actually view that as, I guess for lack of a better term, shutting his grace? How does he feel about the venin? I feel like I've asked this before. Or is it enough of a trade for Malik to get their souls? He considers that a fair balance to be like, well, I'll get your souls. You can mortally still live on, but I have your soul. In addition, the gods also do not seem to want anyone having enough power to challenge them, because this was Theophany's comment at the end, right? When she says, why serve a god when you can be one? And then we have everything about Dunne being a wrathful goddess who will exact retribution against anyone who shuns her grace.
Slice your soul, I believe were her exact words.
Exactly. So there's kind of that hang up. On the other hand, we also do know that the gods are a jealous pantheon, and you may as well, quote, shun them all than show favoritism. Those are things that Major Roralee has said in her guide to appeasing the gods. And if you run with the theory that venin are dedicated to Malik, then you kind of have to believe that Malik is basically trying to kill everyone else off in the world so that I guess he can take their souls. And that feels a bit far-fetched to me. I do believe that the gods are sort of aligned with the principles of magic, and they interfere to keep everything in the world balanced, perhaps. Like they may kind of come in to keep order as it is, but they're not necessarily going to be picking sides per se. And so it feels weird to me that the Venin are working on behalf of Malik, because that implies that the gods, or at least some gods, are working to skew the balance or the nature of things, I guess. So anyways, to move on, something else that I found very interesting is that the priestess says to avoid reacquainting herself with a god who curries her favor, because I strongly feel that this is referring to another god. My best guess, in order of most likely to least, would be Malik, Loyal, or possibly Amari. I feel Malik and Loyal are pretty close, but ultimately I decided to put Malik first. Malik has also been a huge part of the storyline and the world as a god who, in general, deals with souls by taking them after death. War, in general, will, by extension, create a lot of death. We've also seen Violet pray or command Malik at times to save her loved ones, like with Mira and Sawyer. And when you think about it, Asher took Violet to be dedicated, thinking it would help ensure her survival because she was born different. And he likely thought this would make her more susceptible to an early death. So, by dedicating Violet to a war goddess for strength and protection, she was kind of in a way cheating death, aka cheating Malik. Last, I think the priestess saying that she hopes Violet won't have to wield her wrath so Violet won't reacquaint herself with the other is referring to the idea that wielding a power of the god without specific permission from them can lead to death. Next, as far as like the possibility of the other god being loyal, love has been a huge influence on Violet and her choices, thus why I think Loyal could be an option. And we know that there's the whole logic will cede itself to love, as Lilith has said, and her undeniably deep bond with Xaden. Loyal is also the other god who changes souls irrevocably and requires a lifetime dedication, which means if someone serves them, Loyal will be the only god they serve in the same way that Dunne is. So there is some direct competition from that perspective. I also still haven't forgotten Norella's line in Deborelli when she said, "What you call the divine intervention of love, we call alchemy. Two substances combine to make something entirely new, not unlike what's between the two of you." And my third option, Amari, could make sense because she is the queen of the gods. And based on how we've associated the isles and the continents with various gods, Amari best matched the continent, which was referred to as Amaralis by the people in the isles. We've also had the lines about, the magic of the sky, and there has been the phrases under Amari's sky. So perhaps Amari has a vested interest in ensuring the continent doesn't collapse to evil. And so she's playing her hand in there to get Violet. So that was all basically an essay. Y'all already know I love this gothic shit, but I'm now done.
And we love that you love it because I love for someone to do all the hard thinking about it and just feed it to me. So may all the gods bless you, Lorraine, because that was a lot of thinking that I just didn't have to do. Because I was like, oh, Lorraine's got this. My top contenders were definitely Malik and Loyal, the goddess of love. Mm-hmm. We've had many, many conversations about Violet and Xaden's love and how it goes much deeper than quote-unquote normal love. Xaden even says in chapter 65, the bond between violence and me is a kind of magic that has no explanation. So it is beyond words. It surpasses understanding and reason or whatever. No matter what god or goddess you land on, I think it's pretty safe to say this is going to become a major plot line in book 4 or book 5. We have just scratched the surface on how the gods play into the series, and more specifically, how they play a role in Violet's paths and choosing and what her future holds.
Yes. Next, we are back with Violet and Tear, who approach the mountainside and realize that Theophanie has once again and intentionally lured them over and is currently taunting them with the tornado that she produced. Violet quickly draws power and wields a bowl at Theo's wyvern, but misses. And on top of that, a big stone of hail shatters Violet's conduit, leaving Violet with a volume-only approach. Violet and Taryn follow Theophanie along the mountain, continuing to miss with her lightning strikes, and then Theophanie actually cuts the storm to make it harder for Violet to wield. which, very clever, Theo. I'll give you that one. The trap is revealed, and a roar of agony from Sigale floods the bond, and when Violet attempts to check in with Xaden, she is repelled by a wall of ice. So we know that this is approximately the point where Xaden's POV picks up in chapter 65, and how awful to know Xaden felt that pound on his shield from Violet, but ignored it to focus on what he had to do to save everybody.
Oh, you're right. I don't like that either. You know what else I didn't like? I feel like this might be the first time we've ever actually seen Taryn afraid. And the fact that it's for his mate is devastating. I don't like to see Taryn a knock of the Dumadine line. I don't like to see him scared because not a lot makes him sweat. So if he's nervous,
Right.
I'm nervous. They're literally chasing Theophanie and he is like, we will not die today. But if Sigale gets threatened for real, then that's very worrisome. So I hate that.
Moments later, Taryn is captured by a dragon-sized net, and I had a moment where I was like, oh, frick. I guess this one we're going to lose Taryn.
No.
I was like, oh my god, this is it. Taryn's last ride.
Last ride. How dare you?
I was scared for them. She keeps doing this with us. She's playing with Taryn's life.
I know.
And that makes it really feel like he is going to die at some point, and I really don't like that.
Okay, but did you not just hear me say Ternanak on the Dumadine line? Okay.
Yes, I did.
He's unkillable.
I hope so. So, fortunately, Taryn thinks dying is some bullshit, though. And I thought it was hilarious that he tells Violet, it's not over. Of course we'll survive. While they're like crash landing into the forest.
I just told you, Ternanak on the Dumadine line. Ain't that going to bring Taryn down? Speaking of, that was my next note is, I cannot fucking believe they got Taryn and Sigale with a giant fucking net. Of all the ways. I'll be honest, guys, I was writing this at like 2 a.m, but I feel like this is what happened in my mind. Berwin and Theophanie were just raging about catching Xaden and Violet, and they're getting upset. And so they're like screaming at their initiates. And they're like, you know what? You fuckers come up with a way to catch them or we'll destroy you all. Like in a fit of rage, okay? And then I just picture all these poor like initiates. They're just sitting around for hours and hours. They can't come up with anything. And so the one of them is like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's get drunk. Let's get drunk and see if we get any good ideas. I mean, Theo and Berwin are going to kill us anyway. So then they get drunk and then they hatch this idiotic plan. They're like, guys, what if we build a net and attach weights to it? And that will catch the dragon, right? It's just stupid enough that it actually worked. And that's how that plan came about in my mind. Because I'm like, nets? Are you kidding me? But you know what? They worked.
Sure did. Multiple worries plague Violet at once, including concern for Taryn, Sigale, and that one small task of needing to kill Theophany. Speaking of the Chaos Queen herself, Theophanie, over to them. Like they're pinned exactly where she wants us. And I was like, oh, time to play, Violet.
Time to play.
Time to play. That's right. Violet begins scrambling to get the net off, and fortunately, she does have some runes that she tempered, and one that is designed to soften the surfaces does work for her. And I was like, thank the gods she figured out some of those runes.
I totally agree. I am happy it worked. However, I cannot believe everyone knew Violet was going to face off with Theophany alone. And no one was like, hey, Violet, I know you're super capable and powerful, but you're fucking terrible at runes. And since you're going to go face a maven alone, we thought it might be best if you took some of the runes that literally any other person tempered, just in case, because you're actually comically bad at this. And so they're like, Violet, you got this, right? Like, come on. I don't know. I just feel like, Marin couldn't weave her something real quick. Or Trissa. Maybe have Trissa, the expert at runes, weave her a couple of runes really quick, But instead they let Violet take whatever dumb shit that she made in class. Mm-hmm.
Which we have Quinn to thank for, by the way. Quinn was the one that gave her that little tip.
Oh, Quinn.
So it's also at this point Violet finally remembers that Oryx's package is still in her pocket. Upon taking it out, there's an additional message that says, for when you lose yours, strike in the dark. And then the package turns out to contain a carved piece of gray marble, a ceremonial-looking dagger with the familiar flame etchings along the hilt. So Actually, back in chapter 52, when they're protecting Dune's temple in Erasia, a dead wyvern crashes into a, quote, intricately carved central pillar. This causes chunks of the column to go flying, and one is about to hit Violet when it's stopped by a band of Xaden's shadows. Chunk of marble has flame-inspired etched edges, aka the marble of the stagger definitely came from Dune's temple, as we learn shortly. Violet continues on to read the note the priestess had written Auric, and she doesn't get much time to know how Auric knew she needed the weapon and what this piece of rock is, because Theo strides toward them.
I know I said this last episode, but man, it sure would have been nice if Violet would have looked at that like literally any other time than this moment right now, because I think it may have helped speed along the process. But no, not our girl. She'll think about that later. So I love her, but I was like, oh, Violet.
Violet slides down Tyrian's leg, cutting the net as she goes, while Theo reveals that the scream from Sigale indicated she and Xaden had been netted as well. Last episode, we're like, did Theophanie just double-cross Berwin? What's going on? Now I'm like, okay, was this a coordinated plan with Berwin then?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind they were working together on this. I think 100% they're like, you get what you want, I'll get what I want. I do still think that she tried to double cross him by killing Jack. But yeah, I think this was all a coordinated effort.
Oh, okay. But Berwin doesn't know she tried to kill Jack.
I don't think so, no. That was definitely not part of the plan, I don't believe.
Okay. Theo still wants Violet to turn, but Violet proceeds to make several strikes, all of which miss, because I guess Theo's just too dang speedy. At this point, Violet changes strategies and starts to taunt Theophanie about her temple time. And this was a very intriguing conversation. She starts off by asking if Theo misses Umbriel and if she, quote, yearns for the temple. I got very excited because I believe this is confirmation that Theo was indeed dedicated an Umbriel based off Theo's eyes flaring. And I wondered if this was the case in chapter 52 when we had learned that the Eurasian priestesses did not have the tattoo or the silver hair. We were like, okay, well, these traits seem to be specifically noted with the priestess in Umbriel. So it's exciting to have this confirmed. But naturally, I'm also like, how long ago was this? And then how did you get to the continent? Did she just like ferry herself over a couple hundred years ago and then she started wreaking havoc on the continent as a dark wielder? You know what I mean?
I would love Theophanie's backstory. However, knowing she meets her end in this chapter, I kind of feel like we won't ever fully get it. I'm not going to say she's fully exited our story completely from a relevant standpoint, but I do think she'll only be mentioned in passing. I don't think Theophanie's background, etc., will continue to play a role in our story in the way that it did in this book.
Theo also confirms for us that Violet is indeed touched by the gods, but she also distinguishes that since Violet has not actually been dedicated, it means that she is not necessarily pulled to the temple because she is not linked yet. Theophanie then goes on to say, do you know the pain of never being allowed to return, of knowing that it would sever the very thing that's kept me untouchable all of these years? I feel this connects to the excerpt where we learn Dunne is a wrathful goddess who will slice the soul from anyone who enters her temple, having shunned her grace. Theophanie seems to have intentionally stayed away, knowing there would be punishment from Dunne. I did wonder who she has remained untouchable to. Like, is she talking about the riders and their signets, or possibly the dragons as well? This does, however, confirm to me that A, you can be a Venin and still remain dedicated. And then B, there was indeed some power that was bestowed to Theo when she was dedicated. She had access to the power of the gods, thus why when she turned Venin, she basically became this like extremely powerful, undefeatable power, except against Dunne herself. And I think that is because dedication somehow also involves some sort of like soul link or bond or exchange or something. So by Dunne severing that final piece of Theophanie's soul, it then killed her for real, for real. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. Okay, I'm tracking.
So the other context in which saying that something has been severed has primarily been in association with the dragons and their bonds to their riders. And so then I was like, I wonder if even in bonding a dragon, there is some sort of soul exchange as well. Theo knows that she would die if she ever went back to the temple because Dunne would sever her connection or sever whatever bond is created through dedication. And we know that riders die if their dragons die. because that connection is severed as well. Just food for thought.
Hmm.
Violet then asks why Theo still wanted more power when on the Isle she would have had immeasurable power, to which Theo says, why serve a god when you can be one? I thought that was a little funny because I was like, joke's on you, Theo. Turns out you still never were a god. So
Theo thought she was going to be like Malik, and instead she gets to meet Malik.
true that. Yep. At this point, they are interrupted by a huge wave of shadow devouring the field in the fury of an Onyx Storm. It's like, no.
Onyx Storm.
We know exactly what this means from his POV, but also terrifying to know just how dangerous the Signet really is. Violet thinks he's terrifyingly powerful with Sigale, but not like this. This is the kind of force that ends worlds.
This moment hit me like a bolt of lightning. And see what I did there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been wondering as we got closer to the end of the book what the connection is to the title of the book. I toyed around with the idea of like, oh yeah, Xaden's Onyx Eyes and Theophanie's a storm wielder. But now we know what Onyx Storm really means. And let me tell you, it did not make me happy. I did not like it.
So, very important detail. Violet whispers, I love you, down the bond, and it says, the ice cracks, though it doesn't stop the shadows that throw Theophanie to the ground before they rush over Violet, whisper soft against her cheeks. I think a little piece of Violet's love is going to help them find each other in the future. And I have more thoughts about this when we get to Xaden's POV about this particular incident. Regardless, we know there was still a part of the human Xaden left because Xaden's shadows were gentle only for Violet, as they always have been. And I teared up writing that.
Damn it, Lorraine, I teared up reading that.
Tyrion orders her to use the darkness that envelops them, and everything finally clicks into place for Violet. She realizes that Auric has real precognition, and that's why he left her the dagger made at the temple Theo cannot enter into. He also warned her about protecting Dunne's temple and also left that note that said, strike in the darkness.
I almost didn't even put a note about this because I sort of forgot this wasn't confirmed for Violet, but we were totally right about Auric having precognition. Thank you. Next. Although technically, I do have to point out that Auric has not confirmed that. This is just Violet confirming it.
True.
So, like, there's a 0.0001% chance that it's not true. But I mean, bullshit. He totally has precognition. So, this moment was also very evocative of the scene from Signet sparring when Xaden is telling Violet how to strike him even in the dark. In some small way, I feel like he was preparing her for this moment in case she ever needed to strike in his shadows. Now, I know that scene is layered with a lot of other symbolism and metaphors, like for her killing Xaden and all that, but that's what it reminded me of, is just how to navigate in Xaden's Onyx Storm.
Dude, yes. I had that exact same thought sometime later, I think.
Oh, you did?
It really was very... No. It was like very reminiscent of that whole scene. Violet goes on to use her lightning to give her some visibility. Theophanie whirls and tries to lunge for her, only to run straight into Andarna.
Whiplash, baby. Huh? What?
What the
fuck? What the fuck?
I did find it really interesting that Theophanie is like stunned to see Andarna in real life. Specifically, the line states Irid. Theophanie whispers with reverence. So this feels like Theophanie highly regards the Irids, and reverence means to have deep respect for someone or something, kind of like what you'd expect to see from someone who encounters the gods. But Theo didn't care that much about Dunne, and she does care enormously about Andarna. So there is much, much more that implies, I think, about the power of the Irids.
I completely agree. It's also described that her eyes light up when she sees Andarna, and that also implies to me that while Theophanie is aware of Irids, she hasn't seen one ever or in a really, really long time. And so there's this like sense of wonder and like, oh, I almost didn't believe they were real, kind of vibe going.
Right. Unfortunately, we never get a chance to find out why Theophanie has such reverence because Violet has no intention of letting her touch Andarna. The text states, I lunge, driving the dagger straight into her heart. Fire breathes through me until I am char in cinder and agony. First of all, I interpreted this moment like the moment Violet uses the dagger to simultaneously actually, like, what's the term? Not engage Dunne's power, but like
channel?
Yeah, like channel, I guess, Dunne's power as she's doing that. So
Okay.
it's interesting that Dunne's most potent power feels like fire. And I was kind of like, I mean, fire like the dragons, perhaps? Well, so then I started going down a thinking hole here. I was wondering if the reason Theophanie didn't burn was because she was linked to Dunne still, and being untouchable extended to the dragons as well, aka their fire couldn't burn her. Because maybe there is like a connection between dragon fire and Dunne, like the power of Dunne.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because we've been kind of speculating that maybe the Irids in particular may have some kind of special connection to Dunne or to the gods as a whole. And so there's like some kind of way that the fire is connected as a power between both of these entities.
Yeah.
But I was kind of wondering, did Andarna channel the power of Dunne, quote unquote, to produce the kind of fire that can burn venom? We had several discussions about the Irids and their possible connection to Dunne, maybe more than one god. And, you know, maybe the Irids being magic themselves means they have special access to the power of the gods as well, potentially. There's also just a lot of symbolism to this idea of fire being this counter to the ice in terms of fighting the venom as well. We know there is this association with venomous for Xaden feeling icy in nature, and yet the thing that thaws that ice is the warmth of Violet's love. And now we have this like fire feeling power of Dunne be the thing that once and for all kills Theophanie. So I don't know. There's a lot to unpack, but those are my thoughts for now. In general, this was a super cool way to tie in the lessons that we saw with the Signet training in chapter 15 between Xaden and Violet. She did have to use her Signet in the dark. I'm glad in this case that it wasn't against Xaden, but I guess that stands to be seen.
Well, I was going to say, I was like, there's a missing 12 hours that we can't account for, so.
In the end, Theophanie was not invincible, and she is stunned to see that she can, in fact, die. Welcome to mortality, Theo. In response to Theo stating, "Stone doesn't kill venom," Violet says, "You were never just a venom. Dunne is a wrathful goddess to high priestesses who turn their backs on her." And then Theophanie desiccates. So the last thing Violet hears before passing out is Andarna whisper her name. First of all, I'm actually kind of a little bit disappointed that Theophanie was killed off so quickly. I thought she was an excellent villain, and I feel like there was a lot more potential to use her to uncover information about the venom or history, and I feel like we just needed at least one more book, even just a half a book. She was really set up to be this ultimate venom, and now we're stuck with Birkenstock Berwyn for at least another book, so.
Retweet big time. I'm especially confused because at bare minimum, I thought Berwyn and Theophanie were equally matched. But based on the descriptions in this book, I actually thought Theophanie was going to be the big bad, second only to the head honcho venom we haven't met yet. But now It actually seems like Berwyn has been more powerful than her all along. Either way, Theo was a fantastic villain. And I am a little sad to see her go so early. I think there's a lot of opportunity for her. She's very well written. We already talked about in the last episode, and she's cool as fuck. Okay, I'm sorry, she is, you know? The way she swoops in and out, and she has all these cool one-liners. She's a villain queen. And so I'm a little disappointed, to be honest.
Same. The other thing I wanted to say is that we really went through all of that agony of losing Andarna just for her to come back in like 6 chapters. Like, what was the point of that?
You're going to hear about that in my review. Everyone's going to hear about that. You're going to hear a lot about that.
I did have a speculatory thought here, though. Is it possible that Irids, being magic and all, and Andarna previously having the gift of stopping or altering time when she was still a Feathertail, can actually manipulate time progression? So although it felt like Andarna was gone for like 1 to 2 weeks max, it actually was much longer, and she did go spend time with the Irids. Or alternatively, Andarna never actually left the continent, as we were speculating, and that's why Violet still had access to her Signet and stuff, and, you know, why she came back so quickly.
I think the time thing is interesting. I like the idea. My gut says no. Just the way the Irids discuss time seems like they perceive it in the same way that humans do. Like when Leothan takes in Darna, he says, after a few years, you can decide if you want to come back, things like that. So I'm not going to say never, but I'm going to say probably not. Apparently, I got really triggered by this and I wrote a novel. So I'm really confused about the timing of all this. And I'm going to be totally honest. I had some really big ambitions to get out a map and a magnifying glass and do some really complicated time math. But I sat down to do these notes and I was writing and it was 2 a.m. when I got to this part. And I was like, ain't no way. So I'm going to do some rough speculating based on details that I was able to remember and confirm. Of course, we don't know where the Irids' home is, but it's safe to assume it's somewhere in the Isles off of the continent. And Darna has a compromised wing, and so we know she can't fly long distances. And in fact, oftentimes Taryn had to carry her during the quest squad mission because she just wasn't physically able to do it. Violet loses in Darna, and it's described, I don't leave our room for the next 3 days. On the 4th morning, she wakes up and Mira is there. In chapter 55, it says 2 days pass. So now we're up to 6 days post Darna leaving. We do the whole runes thing with Violet and wielding with Felix, and then she does some sexy time on the throne with Xaden again. And then that night, she has to dream with Berwin, and then Garrick shows up. So it's been 6, potentially 7, depending on how precise we're being in 24-hour cycles. Remember, when they leave the island, they met the Irids, they have to go back the long way because of the Griffins. But best case, it would have taken them 2 days to fly directly over the continent instead of going up and around. And Darna cannot fly that far or fast. She would need frequent breaks.
Right,
and then you run into the problem of once you get off the continent and you're flying over the ocean, she has to have somewhere to land or she'll die from exhaustion and or drowning. All of that is to say, the math ain't mathin', and I'm not confident Darna ever made it to where the Irids actually live. I'm not confident she ever left the continent. And we were talking about 6, 7 full days max. That's just not enough time to do anything meaningful.
I think it seems most likely that she just didn't leave at all.
Yeah, agreed.
That's what feels most logical to me at this time. So I guess we'll see what Darna says about all this in book 4. But not 2 years before that comes out. So
at least
no answers yet again. Anyways, so that ends chapter 64. Moving on to chapter 65, the excerpt. This was from the personal journal of General Melgren, and he states that the only thing more unpredictable than the volatile province that is Tyrrendor is her duke. There is a reason reigning aristocracies should never wear black. We've seen how Xaden has risen to a high degree of power, both as a rider with a signet as well as his political power as Duke of Tyrrendor. As Halden has said, the second most powerful title in the Godsam Kingdom goes to a Ryerson of all bloodlines. We've learned that this is typically discouraged for nobility to become riders, though it's not as if this has never happened before. We have discussed many times at this point how primed Tyrrendor is to become independent again, but it makes sense why Navarre's leadership is weary of Xaden becoming Duke. I do want to briefly mention that one small line in Iron Flame, when they are in the Royal Vault looking for Warwick and Lyra's journals, and Imogen asks, no rider has ever been king, right? And then Violet responds, that's not entirely true. Gets cut off. I have a burning desire to know who this past rider king was, because that definitely feels important to understanding why Navarre has discouraged nobility from becoming riders.
I know you've been on that for a long time. I think that's a valid wondering. I also thought a big part of it was, number one, riders die, and often. And a lot of times they die extremely young. This has the potential to create a lot of chaos in the line of succession because oftentimes they die before they produce an heir. Basically, the exact same conversation people have been having about Xaden throughout Onyx Storm. The second reason is it creates confusion within the chain of command. Riders fall under the military structure, but of course, a duke would in a way outrank a lot of military members. And then you throw in the added confusion about provincial commitments and who actually technically commands the military force. And you've got a really tangled web of chain of command to unweave, which also has been true for Xaden a lot in this book. And so I think there's definitely possibly more to it, but I think those two are pretty big reasons why they're like, writers should not be in power in that way, you know?
Totally fair. So next, it feels like by getting this text from Melgren specifically, it also ties in with the sentiment in chapter 66 where people believe that Xaden was the one that killed the 4 pairs of riders and dragons and the 3 elders. I don't believe that that was Xaden, but I guess no one else knows other than Violet about Berwyn and all that stuff too. So if everybody now knows that Xaden is Venin, it makes sense why they think that it was him.
I don't believe it was Xaden either. I mean, we know for sure he wasn't the one who killed Quinn, so we can mark that death off the list. So I understand why the writers think that. We'll talk more about it in the last chapter, but Xaden literally used his Onyx Storm to kill Venin and Wyvern. I don't think he was killing any riders, you know.
So now that we're in Xaden's POV, we see right off the bat that the reason Xaden was nowhere to be seen in Imogen's POV is because he was called by Berwyn. We also see that Sigale was indeed ensnared by a net just before Violet and Taryn were in the previous chapter, so his POV is overlapping with the events of Violet in chapter 64. I also found it interesting that Xaden describes the anger he feels about Sigale's capture as this: wrath courses like a current under the ice I willingly skate on. Anytime wrath is mentioned now, it just always makes me think of Dune, and I continue to believe that there is something linking Xaden to Dune or the gods as well. I also found it weirdly touching to know that Xaden loves Sigale so deeply. We've seen how he sacrificed a lot due to his love for Violet, but we don't necessarily get a lot of explicit confirmation of how deeply Xaden feels for his dragon as well. He thinks she was the first to choose me, to elevate me above all the others, the first to see every ugly side of me and accept it all, and every single person in this fucking canyon will die before they remove a single one of her scales.
Ooh. In a way, it was not surprising at all to hear Xaden feel this strongly about Sigale, but it also was. At the end of Iron Flame, Sigale begs him not to turn because she chose him, but he does it anyway because Violet also chose him. So basically, he chooses Violet over Sigale. But now that Sigale's life is actually threatened, Xaden does not even hesitate for a single second to draw power and turn Asum to protect her.
Yes.
To me, it is also a callback to the riddle Asher left Violet: first love is irreplaceable. And I think we're so used to, you're mine, I'm yours, always and forever, it's just me and you against the world, babe, that we truly forget how deep and important the bond is between a dragon and a rider. And so, in a way, I wasn't surprised at all that Sigale was actually the catalyst for Xaden choosing to fully turn Asum.
This is going to sound kind of like messed up in a way, but I actually was kind of relieved to see that he did that for Sigale. Because, as we've said, we keep seeing Violet and Xaden's love for each other being this thing, and we kept like joking about Violet and her reaction to Andarna leaving and how, what do you mean, like, Taryn sustains your life, but Xaden, like, what was like...
You live for Xaden.
Taryn, yeah, you live for Xaden, and I'm like...
Yeah, I exist for Taryn, but I live for Xaden.
Yes, that quote. And I was like, what the fuck, Violet? Your dragon? Come on. And so, in a way, it was very touching to actually see that Sigale was the instigating moment for him turning full Venin. Even though we didn't want him to turn Venin, but...
Right.
Anyways. So next, we quickly see that Xaden is joined by Panchek's cowering, traitorous ass, and Berwyn is there as well. Yay, Addison, you were right about Panchek. So that's at least one leadership traitor that we know about now, for sure.
I knew it. It's too bad I couldn't have been right about something good, like Violet will cure Xaden. Instead, we got all the bad stuff right. However, we do learn a couple of important details that confirm some things for us. First and foremost, the general Venin that Xaden fought at the end of Iron Flame was in fact Berwyn, because Xaden says he's supposed to be dead, and he bears the scar down the middle of his face from when I threw him into the ravine at Besgaeth. So that has been kind of an ongoing question for us. Was it the same? Was it another, big bad general Venin? Whatever. Now we know it's the same, and that it seems like Berwyn has been continually haunting him. So now the question I still need to resolve and think about is the Sage Venin at Ressen. was that also Berwyn? So that's something I need to go back and do a little research on. But I just got to point that out.
I also found it really notable that he literally can't kill Berwyn because of whatever bond exists between an initiate and their sage. He describes the bond he has with Violet as the kind of magic that has no explanation, but the bond between Berwyn and me is the kind that should never exist. And now that my sage has another sibling he can use against me, I'm screwed. So in regards to the bit about his bond with Violet, this continues to feed into the idea that there is something deeper about the love that they feel for each other. Is there more strongly alluding to the idea of soulmates or mates in general becoming a thing in this book? I don't know, but there's definitely something going on. In terms of the initiate sage bond, I really don't understand how this works or how this came to be magic-wise. But it is terrifying to know that there is this deep link that basically enslaves an initiate Xaden and makes it so that they can't hurt the sage that they kind of belong to or work under. Honestly, it's kind of giving Karanam. If you know, you know.
It's also a callback to chapter 11 when Theophanie tells Violet, beside the fact that he's subpar and you'd be chained to him, powerless to resist his orders. It kind of seems like Berwyn specifically does something to his initiates that make them powerless to act against him and resist what he wants. I also want to know what actually forged the connection between Berwyn and Xaden. Theophanie tells Violet, you will remember that I let you live today and choose me, not Berwyn, as your teacher. So my question is, why didn't Xaden get a choice? At what point was this bond forged between them that connected them, or how did it come about? Because obviously Xaden didn't want to be Xaden anyway, but if he did, he wouldn't want to be chained to someone powerless against his commands. This question actually, the more I think about it, has continued to plague me more and more. And of course, we won't get answers to the next book or whatever, but I was very curious about that.
You're right. I would like some clarification of if it's something specific that Berwyn is doing, or in general, if every initiate has this relationship with their sage. Anyways, this is also when we learn that there's been a huge betrayal to Xaden in the form of someone becoming a new brother, aka turning venom. So the new brother and his unconscious dragon are currently guarded by 7 wyvern in this scene. Xaden specifically thinks, how could he do this? Choose this after watching me stumble and fall over the last 5 months. He's the last person I ever would have expected to turn, and yet here we are. So this confirms it's someone close with Xaden who was immediately informed of Xaden's venom status at the end of Iron Flame. That narrows it down to one of the marked ones, and at this point, without any other context, you could still say that both Bodhi and Garrick are pretty good candidates. Both were spotted in Drathis at the end of Imogen's POV. We saw Bodhi on the ground, quote-unquote, retching, and Garrick heads off to go find some way to be helpful. But we don't know what either of them do after that point. Next, Xaden feels a clamoring, consuming emotion pound at the ice, but he can't let it in. She has her own path. And I was like, trying to check in with him, which is really sad. Panchek begins arguing with Berwyn about how this is not what they agreed to, though Xaden doesn't give a fuck because how much information has he sold to the enemy? Certainly enough to lure all of us to Drathis. How many times did he give them Violet's location? He dies. Oof. So, I mean, I guess it really was just Panchek feeding info to Theophanie, and that's how she seemingly knew all of these pieces of information.
I think based on this, it's pretty safe to assume that anytime Theo showed up or knew where they had been or where they were going, it was Panchek feeding them the info. Of course, the possibility of other traitors and leadership still exists, but for our purposes, I think Panchek fits the bill pretty well.
Signet urges Xaden not to give in to further turning, the Xaden thinks, but he hadn't had her and now he does. So I guess it seems obvious now that I'm saying it out loud, but when I first wrote this, I was still kind of do you think her is referring to Sigale or Violet? I ultimately feel like it's Sigale, but I figured I'd ask just in case.
Yeah, I think he's definitely talking about Sigale here, but now it does make me want to revisit all the dream sequences because there were a lot of hers and she's being thrown around, and now I wonder if some of them were actually about Sigale. Because I know we did a pretty thorough analysis about those, and we were like, oh, we think it means Violet. And we did entertain the possibility. But now I'm kind of wondering.
Berwin is pissed at Pancheck, stating, "Did you not ask for more power? Have I not provided?" I do kind of wonder what Pancheck received in exchange for giving info to Berwin. It doesn't seem like Pancheck is Venom, so I'm curious what he got for being a traitor.
Well, and my question too is, what could a Venom give him? It seems like not much has changed for Pancheck. He's still the commandant of the Writers' Quadrant. I'm just confused, like, how you can give someone power, and what is Pancheck going to do with that power? Yeah, I'd like some clarification on what exactly Pancheck's motivations are.
Because it's weird that you would become a traitor but not become Venom. The payoff doesn't seem worth it to just be still a human, but I don't know. I also thought it was pretty bold of Pancheck to think he had any negotiating power in this situation because he is the, quote, only one who can give access to Berwin's son, quote unquote. I am assuming this son is referring to Jack, but Berwin doesn't really seem to care that much anymore because he says, "I have another," which, is most likely referring to whoever this new brother is.
And or Xaden. Xaden is his new, quote-unquote son. Yeah. This also explains how back in chapter freaking 2, after the Venom attempt to save Jack, Violet, Riddick, and Rhiannon debrief Pancheck, and Violet says, he doesn't even seem fazed that they were working to rescue Barlow instead of going for the ward stones.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Seems like he wasn't fazed because he probably knew it was going to happen, or at bare minimum wasn't concerned because he was in cahoots with Berwin the whole time. And so I was kind of like, oh, that makes sense.
Or he let it happen. Set up the stuff to, Dang.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing was quite crazy. Berwin stabs Pancheck's dragon, causing it to desiccate, and it says the green draining from its scales and shrinking in on itself to a husk. And I was like, what the heck? So does this mean any alloy dagger could kill a dragon? Or is there something specific about the alloy daggers that Berwin has that can kill dragons?
Oh, that's a good question.
Also, assuming this was Pancheck's dragon and Pancheck is not a Venom, this would mean Pancheck would die, right? Unless he turns Venom.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what follows the world building. So either he already is Venom or he's fixing to become one. It also absolutely broke my heart that even though Sigale knew she was about to die, she still begged Xaden not to turn. Like, she has just watched a dragon desiccate in front of her eyes, and she's still like, don't do it for me, Xaden. And I'm like, oh my God, Sigale. I'm like, do it for Sigale. I wasn't even mad about it. I'm like, good, save Sigale.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Berwin turns to Xaden, and at the threat of killing Sigale, Xaden goes full Onyx Storm. I did get some icy chills though when it said, "I breathe in power that pulses beneath my hand like a living, breathing creature and exhale darkness." And then his storm of shadows just black everything out. Notably, with this huge channeling, it says, "My soul departs like pieces of ash from a fire, flaking free and drifting away as power consumes the space it once inhabited. I'm no longer on the ice. I am the ice." I was just wondering though, is this Xaden turning ASIM, or do you think he went even farther in rank?
I think just ASIM. I knew it was a really big pool of power, but I think it takes a lot longer and a lot more power before you become a sage.
Okay, yeah. Xaden's shadows literally go out everywhere, taking down the wyvern that surround them, and then they continue on over Drathis and over the pass and to the field where Violet is with Theophanie. I did find it interesting that when the shadows go up the cliffside, they fall back at the magic that burns to the touch and surge north. I'm assuming that was the wards he was feeling, and it's interesting that the magic of the wards feels like it's burning his magic.
That was a really good catch. That went completely over my head, to be honest. I think I was just too caught up in the moment. And I was like, oh, the wards must have gone up at this point. So
I did tear up again when it said, "I love you." Violet's voice cracks the cold, and a silken thread of warmth wedges itself in the opening before it seals shut, locking it in place. And then it says, "No. Wait." I grab for that thread with desperate hands, clawing to keep her as more of my pieces are blown away, lost to the void. She is warm and light and air and love. Rebecca, why? That was devastating to read. To get back to that little thread of warmth getting caught in his wall of ice, that is what I'm deeming the thread of love. And this will continue to be like this very small little bond that I think will help Xaden find his way back from the ice one day to Violet.
All I have to say about this is Xaden! No! Honestly, I just wanted to scream at him to hold on and to keep fighting for that tiny little thread of love. But what's done is done.
I also found it super important to note that by clinging to emotion of love that he feels for Violet, he stops himself before the next and final piece of himself floats away. I think that this is a reflection of Xaden using his love to hold on to some piece of his soul so that he doesn't continue turning further and losing more of himself. Xaden cuts his shadows as the Gale frees herself. Berwin is also unconscious at this time, and as much as he wants to kill Berwin, A, he still can't, and B, Berwin has, quote, something I need. Obviously, I want to know what that means. Is that referring to a new brother? Is this about his soul? Is there something else?
I wondered if it's information. Maybe Berwin knows the cure or knows how to find the cure. Maybe it's about the Irids. There's a lot of information that the Venin probably have just because they've been around forever, right? And they obviously know a lot about magic. So I kind of thought it's something that the concept of has not been introduced to us.
Sigale and Xaden quickly share a cryptic conversation to hatch a plan that definitely involves marrying Violet, because Sigale says, you cannot mean to. And then it goes on to say, and you think she'll help. Xaden says, she loves me. Sigale responds, Taryn does not, and you haven't looked in a mirror yet. The red veins branching from your eyes look like her lightning. And then Xaden responds, she'll help, she promised. So this part reminded me back at the very beginning in chapter 6, when Xaden gets his title back as Duke. He tells Violet, swear you'll sound the alarm if I go too far, that you'll keep it safe even if it's from me. And Violet does promise. Combined with the reveal that Violet is now married to Xaden in the next chapter, I definitely think that part of the plan Xaden and Sigale are hatching is giving Violet control of Tyrrendor by marrying her so that she can become Duchess. If that is also the case, then that makes it feel pretty likely that this is also fueled by the fact that Bodhi is the new brother. Bodhi was supposed to take over Tyrrendor if anything happened to Xaden, but if Bodhi is the new brother, then they have to quickly hatch a new plan to make sure Tyrrendor can keep control of their seat as they see fit, rather than leaving Navarre to appoint the next Duke or Duchess, since neither Xaden or Bodhi have an heir at this time.
I completely agree with all of this. We will definitely talk more in depth about this in the theories episode, but this pretty much sums up the best and most logical arguments for who the new brother is and why Violet and Xaden get married.
Now, the next thing to cover is that Sigale says, even if she agrees, no one will, and then Xaden responds, someone owes me a favor. The priestess of Dunne's temple in Erasia had written him that note that stated that she was in his debt and owed him whatever favor he sees fit. This was in chapter 55. So I would assume that Xaden is calling in that favor to officiate the marriage, right?
I think yes, but of course unconfirmed. But I think it's the most likely possibility.
Sigale informs him that Violet is hurt, but she will survive, and then also informs him that they finished weaving the wards, though they extend no farther than Dreyfus. Xaden briefly thinks, what even am I? Hers. Do you think that he is saying he is Violet's now? I would think so, right? Like, since this is the thing that they always say to each other with the mind thing.
I do, especially because by this point, Sigale is safe and the conversation has now taken a turn is about Violet, so that tracks for me.
To take this a step further, Xaden has constantly said to Violet that, you know, she owns his soul, and so I do think that he's alluding to some plans with that, which we'll expand upon in the next chapter. But to close out this chapter, Sigale agrees to convince Taryn to help with the plan, and Sigale says her decision will determine our fate before they fly off. That ends chapter 65. Moving on to our final chapter, chapter 66, the excerpt. This was Article 5, Section 7 of the Dragon Riders Codex, and it states, while cadets are strongly encouraged not to form romantic attachments while studying in the Quadrant, lieutenants are permitted to marry whomever they choose upon graduation. As far as we know, Violet is still a cadet, but Xaden is a lieutenant at this time. I wonder if this is why they needed a favor from the Priestess of Dunne, because technically Violet can't marry yet according to the Codex. I don't know. But also, that probably doesn't even matter because Xaden is a Duke of Tyrrendor. So
either way, we know that Violet and Xaden are married as fuck right now. So
yeah. All right, our final chapter from the end of Xaden's POV. We fast forward like 12 hours. Violet wakes up at 3 a.m. on the ground outside of Ryerson House to Brennan running out and shouting to her. I found it kind of odd that Andarna says, "I will not let them burn you." And Violet responds, "Why would my brother burn me?" I was kind of confused at first, but then with the additional context of the missing dragon eggs, I wonder if this is in reference to the dragons of the Empyrean or like leadership or whatever burning her for stealing the eggs. I do actually think it's totally possible that Violet and Andarna were involved with that, but, obviously Violet doesn't remember because her memory was wiped. Presumably, death by dragon fire is a common way to kill traitors. Alternatively, maybe they think that, I don't know, Violet turned venom or something about her is different because they think she was with Xaden. This is all just speculatory, and I'm not committed to any of these thoughts, so...
I think it's most likely that they think she aided Xaden in some way. It's pretty clear they know Xaden. Well, they probably think he just turned venom, but they know Xaden is now a venom. They think he's responsible for killing riders and their dragons. So I assume you would get scorched for aiding a traitor as well. And so I think that's probably more likely the cause.
So a writer named Wilson comes out to give a report where we learn the following combined with some thoughts as we go. So first, there are 4 pairs of riders and dragons, along with 3 elders who were murdered in the valley in what they think was sometime within the last few hours. Who do you think the 4 dead pairs of riders and dragons are? I suppose we don't know for sure at this time and just have to kind of wait for that reveal. But as far as the elders go, I don't think we've ever learned of who the other elders of the dens are, right?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, who are the dead pairs of riders? I'm going to say it's riders that we don't know very well, if at all, or they're sort of nondescript. They're mentioned in passing, maybe perhaps like a first year from second squad, like Baylor or Avalon, or like a wyvern took them out, or, whatever, right? But I don't think anyone super notable is involved in that pair. To answer your second question about the elders, so we have not been given any information specifically about this. I'm wondering if an elder is just a term for any dragon of a certain age and stature within the Empyrean, but we don't really get a lot of information about the Empyreans. I don't think any of the Navarian riders showed up to help Braithus. So,
oh, that's right. I forgot that they didn't really come to help, so it wouldn't make sense that they were...
No. So, and you also have to remember that the Empyrean has now been split. There's functionally 2 Empyreans. And so there's new elders that we're not aware of. We knew Coda is the elder for the Den of Black Dragons, but that was in Navarre. We honestly don't know enough about the quote-unquote new Empyrean in Eurasia. So my best guess is that it's a new Empyrean. They ascribed to new elders, and that's what they're talking about. But I also think it's possible elder could just be for any dragon of a certain age or power level.
Older dragon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unbonded as well would be my guess, since they're making a distinction between bonded pairs and elders. So all excellent questions, though.
Okay. I'm going to agree with you on that. Definitely probably not Coda in that case or related. So we just don't know. They also have 4 other missing riders. So that is likely Xaden, Bodhi, Garrick, and then if we're assuming Panchik is still alive, then he'd be the 4th missing. Or I guess it doesn't matter if Panchik is alive.
I was going to say alive or dead, he's still missing. Yeah.
Wilson goes on to say that, basically he believes Xaden was the one to do all of this. And I was like, no, I don't think that he murdered the riders and the elders. Unless he did so to get to the eggs for whatever plan, if he was involved with that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, Lorraine. I am not convinced in the slightest that Xaden had anything to do with the eggs. I think it's possible that's a totally separate thing. I'm not even convinced that the eggs have been taken for something bad. I don't know how it can be construed as good, but the possibilities are so open on that. I will gently speculate, but you could really go a ton of directions. But I do feel confident saying that Xaden was not involved in that. Or I guess I should say,
I don't know.
If he was the one who physically took them, it's because Berwyn literally made him. Made a command that Xaden physically could not retaliate against. That would be the only way. But with a purposeful intention, no, absolutely not.
Right. So next, we also learn that the wards are still holding in Drathis. So this means Imogen's plan to get everyone to disarm their alloy daggers did in fact work. So that's a small little win there. And last but not least, the tally at this time is that there are 6 missing dragon eggs from the hatching grounds. So obviously, would love to know what is going on with these eggs. And the first question that comes to mind is who stole the eggs? I did a lot of speculating in here that retroactively looking at it now, I'm like, why did I do all this? I don't know. But Wilson assumes it was Xaden, and that seems like a possibility, but that seems really out of character. If he did, it wasn't because he wanted to, or maybe he took them for like some really, really good reason that we have yet to find out. My other thoughts are maybe it was Brennan, because he's also been in the erasure hatching grounds with Xaden as part of their little plans to try and cure Xaden's venomness when they sat with the eggs. So that means that the dragons have let them in before. Another thought, maybe the Irids were involved. We know that they have disapproved the Empyrean and how they raise dragons, so perhaps they took some eggs to raise differently or took them somewhere else. Alternatively, maybe it was another traitor in leadership, so we have more among them doing nefarious things. Last, maybe Auric had some sort of vision that prompted him to take them.
Hey, maybe to protect them or something. We don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. All of these are options. And to be honest, I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the theories episode. But we just get so little information that there are, like I said, so many options. This is one of those we really just have to wait and see in book 4.
Right. So the next question, how were the eggs stolen? Some of my ideas. Option 1, whoever did it, maybe Xaden, went in alone, saved the riders and elders who could have been there guarding the hatching grounds, nabbed the eggs, and pieced for some reason that has yet to be revealed.
To me, that seems the most likely option. Not that Xaden did it, but whoever did slayed the elders that were protecting the eggs. And then it begs the question, who can kill a dragon? So that kind of starts pointing it heavily towards like Berwyn or another really powerful
with
venom.
his freaking weird daggers.
His dragon killing daggers.
Yeah. Option 2. Andarna and Violet also helped since Andarna can hide in camouflage, so maybe she went in and stole the eggs. This could also explain why she says, I won't let them burn you, and why Violet's memory was erased. Option 3. Garrick helped and distance wielded to steal the eggs after recovering, but he was also, very exhausted at the end of Imogen's POV, so that kind of seems unlikely to me, unless he turned venom. Option 4. The person that stole the eggs is completely unrelated to Xaden and Violet or the other 3 missing riders. And as you have said, this is just like a completely separate thing that is totally not related to Xaden.
At the end of the day, the real question is not who, but why. For what purpose?
Right.
And when we know the why, that will really help us narrow down the who.
Yes. So, final question. Why were the dragon eggs stolen? What possible plan could there be for that? The first thing that came to mind is how Queen Marliese wanted dragon eggs in exchange for Umbriel's help on the continent, but she requested 2 of each, so this would only be half of the requested amount. Not to mention, if there is no magic and the dragons would be in pain, why give the dragon eggs to Marliese or, plan to give them to her, knowing that it would inflict pain upon them to live in a place that doesn't have magic, Another thought, presumably the 6 eggs are one of each color, so maybe they were taken to another location with the intent of possibly creating a new wordstone or something like that. But obviously, if you're going to try and create a new wordstone, then that also means you need more Irids.
I'm thinking maybe not to fire a new wordstone, but maybe to create a new hatching ground. Because remember, in Iron Flame, when an egg first hatches, there's that big ripple of magic, and they're like,
it transforms the area back into.
So maybe they're trying to create a new hatching ground somewhere. That's a possibility.
True. Okay, then my last thought. We know that there is magic in dragon eggshells, so perhaps someone took the eggs preemptively, intending to do something with both the magic of the eggshells and the dragons for a reason we have yet to learn. To loop in with this, we know Feathertails possess unique magical gifts that they can give to somebody without being bonded? They can give their Feathertail gifts.
I think they have to be bonded.
They have to be bonded or not.
I think they do.
Okay.
And that's why they didn't want anyone to know about Andarna, because they didn't want leadership trying to bond Feathertails to steal their gifts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So those were some possible, why the eggs were stolen reasons. Anyways, to move on, Violet attempts to reach for Taryn, only to find that the bond with him is foggy, like he's asleep. And then Dunne says he needs a cycle of rest to recover, which triggers Violet to remember killing Theophanie and Xaden's Onyx Storm of Shadows. I definitely feel like something went down with Taryn and Sigil's bond. The way it's described, it feels like Taryn is acting kind of like how Violet acted when her bond with Andarna was cut. And I kind of wonder if Andarna meddled with the bond so that they could be apart, since presumably Sigil is still with Xaden, and they are probably going to be staying away for a while.
I didn't even think about that. No, I don't like that. No.
I don't like it at all either.
Yeah. Yeah, because Sigil is missing at the end. Like, where is Sigil?
Exactly. I mean, I also feel like the bond had to be cut or altered because Xaden himself has mentioned that leadership could easily use the connection between their dragons, which also links their lives against them. So as long as the dragons are connected, Xaden and Violet are connected. So, if they cut the bond, it helps ensure that they can't kill Violet to kill Xaden or like vice versa.
Yeah, totally.
This would also be supported by Wilson's comment when he tells Brennan, just because she's your sister doesn't mean she's not the fastest way, gets cut off. I'm willing to bet that he was going to say something like, she's not the fastest way to kill or to find Xaden or something like that,
Oh, wow. See, I didn't even read it like that at all, but that makes a lot of sense. I think when I read it, I was like, she's not the fastest way to find out what happened or basically to interrogate her. But what you're saying makes sense and it's much more ominous.
I know. I don't really like that at all, but yikes. Anyways, Wilson leaves and Brennan asks Violet if she knows anything about Xaden and where he went. I genuinely don't think Brennan knows anything about what happened because he asks Imogen next and she says, I haven't seen him since yesterday. And then when she asks about Garrick, Brennan gently confirms that he is among the missing. Next, this is when they notice the ring on the finger. Violet now has a beautiful gold ring with an emerald the size of my thumbnail. Oh gods, I know that stone. It matches the others from the Blade of Erasia upstairs on Xaden's nightstand. Okay. So, cool to know that the missing emerald was important, and now we also know what it was used for. We know that the stone was present in the blade in Deborelli, but it wasn't until Violet saw it again in Xaden's room in chapter 48, which means sometime between Deborelli and chapter 48 was when Xaden had the ring made, meaning he was already planning to propose to Violet. Cute. Probably not under these circumstances, but the events of these final chapters, prompted him to do it now.
Oh, see, I didn't think it was cute at all. I thought he did this in anticipation of something like this happening. Probably not Bodhi turning Venom, as we assume, but in the event that Bodhi were to die in a conflict or a battle with the Venom, then he would still have the same problem. Tyrandor would no longer have an heir. And so I think he did this as a contingency to the contingency. And this was part of his, peaceful state is making plans for Tyrandor. It's not that I don't think he'd want to marry Violet. I think he would. But I still contend that under no circumstance would he do this, given his venomness, unless it was absolutely necessary. I think if he was cured and all that, sure, why the hell not, But yeah, I didn't think it was cute at all. Sorry.
I'm going to live in my fairy tale and believe that he still wanted to marry regardless. Violet starts reflecting on everything that she's learned and she thinks Xaden wouldn't do that. Would he? And then checks the bond only to find nothing. And she thinks it's gone or he's too far away to feel it. I remind myself to keep from panicking. Or it was Andarna. Brennan moves on to read the paper that she has in her pocket, which carries the seal of Dunne with Violet's permission, and Brennan says it's an official blessing of your legal binding marriage by the head priestess of Dunne's temple. So we did indeed get our contract papers with Sorengale, 2 R's. But I am a little bit sad that we didn't get to see the scene before Imogen, swiped it away. Also, to clarify, I do think that this was most likely conducted in Dunne's temple in Eurasia. And I say that because I have seen people like questioning where this actually happened. And some people are like, oh, they went to Umbriel. And I'm like, I just don't see how that's possible.
Too far.
I don't, too far. Doesn't make sense.
And why? Why would they need to get married in Umbriel?
You have a temple right there. Yes.
Uh-huh,
yes. And so,
exactly. And she owes him a favor, so.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All I have to say about this is that Rebecca Yarros better make this right. She needs to cure Xaden, and then Violet and Xaden get to have a redo wedding where everything is good, and then everyone is happy, and most importantly, they have a perfect wedding night that we also get to read about with all the details, all of them.
Violet flips over the missive to see a note from Xaden that says, "Don't look for me, it's yours now. He's gone." No. The Duke of Inks is now the Duke of Ain't. He's gone.
I somehow missed that in your notes the first time I was reading through them.
No, but okay, for real, I think when it says it's yours now, I think we may have some double meaning at play. And now hear me out. The obvious answer is that he's referring to Tyrrendor being Violet's, since she is now the Duchess of Tyrrendor. But I think the possible hidden meaning is referencing the idea that through this marriage and whatever the priestess did to bless or bind them in marriage, it involved a linking of Xaden's like last little bit of soul to Violet somehow to preserve it as a future way to like save him later on. If Xaden continues to turn, he will lose more and more of his soul. And remember, there was that one like little sliver of Violet's love that he feels gets wedged into the crack of his wall of ice. And that small bit of love was enough to remind him to stop channeling and allow him to keep that final piece of his soul from floating away. In addition, he also says, "It's yours now," instead of like she. And typically when talking about Tyrrendor, they've primarily used the pronoun she, but in this case he says it, which implies to me that there is a possibility for it not to be Tyrrendor. And I think that possibility is that he's talking about his soul.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm down for it.
So I'm not sure how this exactly is all going to work. I am not the magic, and I am not a priestess, and I am not a god. So I don't know how this is going to happen. But what if we're getting a little like Horcrux Harry Potter moment with the ring?
Oh my God.
Xaden's soul.
Lorraine, go to bed. It's late, honey. You need to lay down. In all seriousness, I do like the idea that there's a double meaning here, right? That's very Rebecca Yarros to write something like that. And we think she means Tyrrendor. But maybe it's a message for Violet specifically. And the fact that Tyrrendor is hers is a given. So maybe it is something more meaningful like that. So, and now I'm sad again.
Yeah. Violet finally realizes that someone must have fucked with her memories, and that someone was Imogen. But not so fast. She can't be evil because Imogen only did what Violet asked her to do, supposedly. From that little reveal right at the end there, I think that Imogen is definitely in on the plan, and so is Violet. And I do think it's within the realm of possibilities that Violet asked Imogen to do this to protect her from questioning and to protect Xaden, right? I have seen speculations from people about Imogen being possibly bad and betraying everyone on all this stuff, but I don't know. Like, given her POV and everything, I don't think that she's bad. And I don't think that she did any of this without specifically being asked to. Also, does this mean Imogen can specifically find and wipe certain memories or be like, I need to erase X many hours of memories. Boom. Erased. You know what I mean?
I don't think Imogen's bad at all. I think, again, she's doing what she's asked. And actually, it doesn't surprise me that Imogen would be willing to do this because besides the fact she has a close relationship with Violet and Xaden, we get that quote from her POV. If we lose both him and Ryerson, Tyrrendor falls to whomever the king appoints. I'd rather die than see a Navarian aristocrat on the burned throne Mom and Katrina died defending. And so it does not surprise me in the slightest that Imogen is going to, even if it's selfishly, protect Tyrrendor and the throne of Tyrrendor. Not to mention, if we're believing Imogen, which we have no reason not to, It's what Violet asked her to do. And so she's just honoring what Xaden and Violet both wanted. So I don't see how she could be.
I don't really either. I mean, I've seen people speculating about this because their interpretation is that maybe Imogen was not telling the truth about this. And so then people were like retroactively being like, okay, well, what other memories has Imogen erased? But at this time, I don't think we have any reason to think Imogen is doing anything nefariously. So one last thing, if Imogen erases memories, how are they going to get restored? There's no, like little hypnosis therapy or anything. So the only thing that I can think of is like, is it going to involve Dane? Like, is Dane going to be able to go and find it somewhere?
Like the memories are still stored in Violet's brain. Imogen has just wiped her ability to access them. So she's not taking them out of the mind. She's just preventing you from getting to them. And then Dane goes in there and is like, I can see them. Oh, that's interesting. I like that idea.
Possibly. Anyways, wow. What an ending.
What a freaking ending.
And now, guys, we can move the fuck on. We're done.
We're donezos, except for next week when we do our theories episode.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And probably
until next week, we're done.
Yeah. And probably for the next, few years, we'll pop up with new Empyrean content when a POV chapter gets released or a bonus or anything related. But until then, we're done.
Yeah. Okay.
And I hope everyone enjoys cliffhangers because it's going to be a long time before we get any answers. So now would be a good time to start TOG if you haven't yet, so you can follow along with us for TOG because you've got 8 books to sustain you. And I believe by Lorraine and I's count, over 90 hours of Throne of Glass content so far to sustain you.
Yes.
So we got you covered.
All right. So that now concludes our assembly meeting. And now we just have our favorite moments to do. So the first favorite moment was courtesy of Fierge. And it's when Rhiannon says, that's a little menacing. And then she responds, then let us be menaces.
That's a great one. I love that one. I love in Rhiannon's POV when she is thinking to herself, Grey Castle and Mari are already on my lecture list. Fuck knows what either of those two were thinking. And I just like that Rhea is always on the lecture. She's like, you're going to get a lecture. You're going to get a lecture. I feel like all she does is lecture the first years.
Oh, yeah. Chasing them down.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. I also liked from Rhee's POV when she thinks the strength of the squad is in the whole, not the individual. We will hold this pass. And then another one from Rhee's POV is when she said, this is how we're meant to face combat together.
Aw, Rhee. I loved when Sigale scooped Violet up and she said, you are an inconvenience for which there is no adequate measurement. Like, Sigale's mean.
I know she really is. But that was quite nice for Sigale. So
True.
I liked in Imogen's POV when Glayne tells her, did you fall off? No, I did not bond a whiner.
That's so Glayne.
Yeah.
In a loving, devastated way, I love when Quinn said to Imogen, we made it a good one.
Also, from that little scene, I liked when Quinn said, you're mine and I love you too.
Bring Quinn back. Bring Quinn back. The last one I have is a shared one between Lorraine and I, and it is when Xaden thinks she is warmth and light and air and love. And I'm going to hold on to that for a long, long time.
All right, guys. Well, we're done with the book. So
we're done. Holy shit. Oh my gosh. I never thought this day would come. Like, literally.
Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on Instagram or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today.
So stay violent.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for so many bloopers.
Hi, everyone.
Oh,
welcome back to the...
Wait.
Oops.
I don't have my mic. Fuck. I don't have my mic anywhere near me at all. Like, not even a little bit
near me. Make sure
the
gain's not super high. So you're not yelling.
I'm not like, hey, oh my God, it's so hot. It's so high right now. Fuck knows that. Fuck knows. Oh my gosh. Fuck knows. I can't say that. Okay. Oh my God. Chapter 63. Chapter 63. I got a little Elizabeth there. Okay. I'm going to be a mushy. I'm going to be, oh my gosh. I can't talk now. Okay. Oh, being emotional made me kind of like, I got a little rush of adrenaline. I'm like, whoo, okay. That sounded like really organic. I thought you were doing that off the cuff, so I wasn't even
Nope,
paying
nope,
attention.
it was not. I'm just very good at like
That was
I'm
really
very
'cause I
good at
thought-
like reading.
I really thought you're the best reader, Lorraine. So like low key, I really did because I quit looking because I'm like that sounded really organic. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
shit,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
you
yeah,
read
yeah.
that from the script. Okay, damn. Woo! I forgot how to podcast.